The night my stepmother smashed a crystal plate across my face at the Christmas dinner table. Everyone froze like actors in a twisted play. Blood dripped onto the white tablecloth while my father refused to look up. No one moved to help me. Then the doorbell rang. My father opened it to reveal the ex-wife he claimed had abandoned me decades ago. She held up a leather folder and calmly announced she was here to stop them from stealing my house. My name is Lena Hartman. I am 32 years old, a senior financial analyst for a mid-sized firm in Chicago, and as I sat at the dining room table in Briarwood, Illinois, I realized I was also the biggest fool in the room. The air in the dining room was thick enough to choke on, smelling of roasted duck, pine needles, and expensive perfume. My stepmother, Marla, had outdone herself with the staging. That was what she did best. The mahogany table was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the twinkling fairy lights she had strung delicately around the bay window. Crystal stemware caught the light, fracturing it into little rainbows that danced over the pristine white tablecloth. To the aunts and cousins gathered around, it looked like a scene from a holiday catalog. It looked like a home. But I knew better. I knew exactly how much the heating bill was to keep this drafty old house warm enough for Marla's silk dresses, because I had paid it 3 days ago. I knew the cost of the roof repairs that kept the snow from leaking onto the hardwood floors, because I had signed the check for the contractor last month. Since my divorce, when I had moved back into my childhood home to get back on my feet, as my father put it, I had been doing a lot less leaning and a lot more lifting. "Lena, darling, you are barely touching your wine," Marla chirped from the head of the table. Her voice was like spun sugar, sweet and brittle. She swirled her glass of Cabernet, her manicured nails tapping against the bowl. "It is a very decent vintage, though I suppose on a single income, you might not be used to such things anymore." A ripple of polite, uncomfortable laughter went around the table. My father, Richard, cleared his throat and took a long sip of his own drink, staring studiously at the centerpiece of holly and ivy. "I am fine, Marla," I said, keeping my voice level. "I have an early morning tomorrow. Some of us have year-end reports to file." Marla offered a sympathetic pout to my Aunt Sarah, who was sitting across from me. "She works so hard, poor thing. And for what? Sitting in a cubicle all day, staring at numbers? It is such a shame about the divorce. I always told Richard that a woman her age needs a husband to secure her future, especially without children to anchor her. Now look at her, back in her old bedroom." I tightened my grip on my fork until my knuckles turned white. "Back in my old bedroom," she said, as if I were a teenager grounded for bad grades, rather than the primary financial pillar of this household. I wanted to slam my hand on the table and list the transaction history of the last 6 months. I wanted to scream that the new granite countertops she was leaning her elbows on were paid for with my bonus from the second quarter. I wanted to mention that while she was posting unboxing videos of designer handbags on social media, I was paying the property taxes she and Dad had somehow forgotten for 2 years running. But I didn't. I bit the inside of my cheek and tasted copper. Keep the peace. I told myself, it is Christmas. My phone buzzed against my thigh under the table. I ignored it, but it buzzed again, insistent. I slipped my hand down and glanced at the screen, keeping it below the tablecloth. It was a text from Jason, a colleague of mine at Northbridge Analytics. He was working the holiday shift to cover for a sick parent. "Hey Lena, sorry to bother you on the holiday." The message read, "System flagged a weird inquiry on your file because of the address match. Did you authorize a property refinance request appraisal for 412 Oak Street? Came in this morning. Seems rush ordered." I frowned, staring at the glowing pixels. 412 Oak Street. This house, my grandfather's house. Why would there be a refinance request? And why would it flag on my work profile unless someone was running deep checks? I looked up, confusion knitting my brow. Marla was watching me. Her eyes were sharp, reptilian, devoid of the warmth she projected to the rest of the room. She saw the confusion on my face, and for a second, a flicker of something like panic crossed hers, but she buried it instantly under a wide, predatory smile. She grabbed her spoon and tapped it against her wine glass. Clink, clink, clink. "Attention, everyone," she announced, standing up. Her sequined dress shimmered under the chandelier. "Richard and I have a little announcement to make, a Christmas surprise, if you will." My father looked up, his face pale. He looked like a man marching to the gallows, not someone sharing good news. He gave a weak nod. "We have been doing a lot of thinking," Marla continued, placing a possessive hand on my father's shoulder, "about the future, about what is best for the family. This big old house. It is just too much work for Richard and me. We are not getting any younger, and the upkeep is simply dreadful." I felt a cold stone drop into my stomach. "So," she beamed, "we have decided to embrace a new chapter. We are selling the house and downsizing to a lovely luxury condo in the city. We are putting the house on the market immediately after New Year's." Silence descended on the table. Aunt Sarah gasped politely. "Oh, Marla, leaving the family home? But Walter built that gazebo in the back himself." "It is time to move on," Marla said firmly. Then, she turned her gaze directly to me. The sweetness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard pragmatism. "And, of course, this means some changes for you. Lena, since the realtors will need to stage the house for open houses, we will need you to find your own arrangements by January 31st. It is really for the best. A grown woman should not be living with her parents anyway. It is time you stood on your own 2 feet. The humiliation washed over me like ice water. It wasn't just the eviction. It was the public dressing down. She was painting me as a leech, a failure who needed to be scraped off their shoe so they could enjoy their golden years. "You are selling the house?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the murmur of the guests. "We are downsizing, Lena," Marla corrected. Her tone clipped. "Do not make a scene." "You cannot sell this house," I said, louder this time. I pushed my chair back and stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my mind was racing, connecting the dots between the text message from Jason and this sudden announcement. "This house belonged to Grandpa Walter. The deed is in his name." "Grandpa Walter has been dead for 10 years, Marla snapped. "Everything went to your father, and as his wife, I think I know what is best for our assets." "Your assets?" I let out a dry, incredulous laugh. "Marla, I have paid the property taxes for the last 3 years. I paid for the new furnace when the old one died last winter. I paid for the kitchen remodel you are showing off right now. How exactly are you downsizing an asset you do not even pay to maintain?" The room went deathly quiet. Aunt Sarah put her fork down. My father shrank into his chair, studying his napkin as if it contained the secrets of the universe. Marla's face flushed a deep, ugly red. The mask of the gracious hostess cracked. "How dare you?" she hissed. "You ungrateful little brat. We took you in when your husband dumped you. We gave you a roof over your head when you came crawling back here with nothing but your suitcases and your failure." "I came back to help," I shot back. "Because Dad said he was drowning in debt. I have been paying rent. Marla, I have been paying more than rent." "You have been paying your way," Marla screamed, her voice rising to a screech. She abandoned the pretense of the dinner party entirely. "You think throwing a few $1,000s at a bill makes you the owner? You are nothing. You are a guest, and you have overstayed your welcome." She leaned over the table, her eyes bulging. "The bank knows who the real owners are, Lena, and it certainly is not the charity case sleeping in the guest room." "The bank?" I caught the slip. "What does the bank have to do with this? The house is paid off. Grandpa paid it off in 1995. I looked at my father. "Dad, why is she talking about the bank?" My father refused to meet my eyes. "Lena, please," he mumbled. "Just sit down." "No," I said, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. The text message, the refinance inquiry, the rush to sell. "You are trying to cash out, aren't you? You are trying to sell it out from under me before I figure out what you have done." I looked straight at Marla. "This house is not yours to sell, and I am not going anywhere." Marla snapped. It happened in slow motion. Her hand shot out. not for her wine glass, but for the heavy crystal serving platter that held the cranberry sauce. She didn't just throw it, she swung it. It was a backhanded motion, fueled by a decade of jealousy and a terrifying amount of adrenaline. The heavy crystal connected with the side of my face with a sickening thud-crack sound. The impact knocked my head to the side. I stumbled back, catching myself on the edge of the buffet table. For a second, there was no pain, only a ringing silence and a flash of white light. Then, the warmth hit. Blood. It poured down my cheek, hot and fast, dripping off my chin and splashing onto the pristine white tablecloth next to the gravy boat. A shard of the shattered plate clattered onto the hardwood floor, spinning noisily before coming to a rest. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. My Aunt Sarah had her hands over her mouth. My cousin Mike looked like he wanted to disappear into the wallpaper, but the person who broke my heart wasn't the woman who had just assaulted me. It was my father. Richard Hartman half rose from his chair, his eyes wide with shock. "Marla," he started, his voice weak. Marla turned on him, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. She shot him a look so cold, so venomous, that it physically stopped him. "Sit down, Richard," she snarled. And he did. My father. The man who had taught me how to ride a bike. The man who used to check under my bed for monsters. Looked at his bleeding daughter. Then looked at his wife, and sat back down. He picked up his napkin and wiped his mouth, trembling, refusing to look at me. That hurt more than the crystal. The pain in my cheek began to throb, a sharp, slicing agony. I reached up and touched my face. My fingers came away slick with bright red blood. A drop fell onto my blouse, blooming like a dark rose on the silk. I slowly straightened my spine. I grabbed a cloth napkin from the table and pressed it to my cheek. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I looked at Marla. She was panting, standing there with her hand still raised, looking defiant but also slightly terrified of what she had just done. "You are a parasite," she spat, though her voice wavered slightly. "Get out of my house." I stared at her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a switch flip inside me, turning off the daughter who wanted to be loved and turning on the woman who analyzed risk and destroyed discrepancies for a living. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," I said. My voice was low, steady, and terrified them more than any shout could have. Marla opened her mouth to retort, probably to scream for me to leave again, but the sound was cut off by a noise from the front of the house. Ding-dong. The doorbell chimed, cheerful and melodic, completely at odds with the violence hanging in the air. Marla let out a frustrated groan, throwing her hands up. "Oh, for God's sake, who is that? Probably the neighbors complaining about the noise, or some idiot caroler." She glared at my father. "Richard, get the door. Get rid of them. I need to deal with her." My father scrambled up, eager for any excuse to leave the room. He practically ran to the foyer. I didn't move. I kept the napkin pressed to my face, staring down the relatives who were too cowardly to intervene. I could hear the front door creak open. I heard the wind howling outside, blowing snow onto the porch. "Can I help you?" my father asked, his voice sounding strained. Then, silence. A long, heavy silence that stretched for 5 seconds, then 10. "Richard," a woman's voice said. The sound of that voice sent a shockwave through my body that made me forget the pain in my face. It was a voice I hadn't heard in 24 years. It was smoky, calm, and terrifyingly familiar. "You look," the voice said. I turned toward the archway leading to the hall. Marla froze. My father backed into the dining room, looking as if he had seen a ghost. He was pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Stepping out from behind him was a woman. She was wearing a dark, expensive wool coat that was dusted with fresh snow. Her hair, once dark like mine, was now a striking silver gray, cut into a sharp, elegant bob. She held a slim leather briefcase in one gloved hand. It was Elaine Carter, my mother. The woman who I had been told walked out on us when I was 6 years old because she didn't want to be a mother anymore. The woman who, according to Richard and Marla, had abandoned me to run off with an artist in California. She stood in the entryway, radiating a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept over the room. They landed on Marla, who looked like she was about to faint. They landed on the terrified relatives. Then they landed on me. Her gaze dropped to the blood-soaked napkin pressed to my cheek, then down to the shattered crystal shards on the floor, and finally to the bloodstains on the tablecloth. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened into something that looked like steel. She didn't rush to hug me. She didn't cry. She looked at me with a clinical assessment, like a general surveying a battlefield casualty. "Hello, Lena," she said softly. "You have grown." "Elaine?" my father whispered, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? You cannot just show up here." "I can," she said, her voice crisp and clear. She walked past him, stepping right up to the dining table. She placed the leather briefcase down on the blood-spattered tablecloth with a heavy thud. She looked through my father, then turned her gaze to Marla, who was trembling with rage and fear. Finally, she looked back at me. "Lena, darling," she said, and for the first time, there was warmth in her tone, though it was wrapped in iron. "I came because I received an alert." She tapped the leather folder. "I am here," she announced, her voice ringing through the silent room, "because someone is trying to sell a house that does not belong to them." Standing in that dining room with a napkin pressed to my throbbing cheek, staring at the woman who had birthed me, I felt the ground beneath my feet shift. It was not just the physical dizziness from the blow Marla had delivered. It was a vertigo of the soul. For 32 years, the story of Elaine Carter had been the foundational myth of my life. It was the Bible of the Hartman household, verse and chapter written by my father and annotated by my stepmother. The story went like this. Elaine was beautiful but unstable. Elaine was an artist who found the suburbs suffocating, and when I was 6 years old, Elaine had packed a suitcase, taken all the savings from the family safe, and driven off into the sunset to chase a new lover and a painting career in California. She had chosen freedom. She had chosen herself, and in doing so, she had chosen to discard me like a piece of unwanted furniture. For decades, I had carried that rejection like a stone in my pocket. It shaped everything. It made me quiet. It made me desperate to be useful, to be kept. My father played the role of the abandoned martyr perfectly. He was the hero who stayed. And when Marla arrived 4 years later, when I was 10, she was positioned not just as a stepmother, but as a savior. She was the woman who stepped in to clean up the mess Elaine had left behind. I remembered the early days with Marla. I remembered the desperate, pathetic eagerness I had to please her. I would scrub the baseboards until my knuckles were raw. Hoping she would notice, I would hide my report cards, even the ones with straight A's, because Marla would only sigh and say that book smarts were no substitute for charm. I tried to shrink, to be low maintenance, to be the opposite of the selfish woman who had left us, but it was never enough. Marla would look at me with a pitying sneer and compare me to the imaginary daughter she wished she had, a girl who was bubbly, grateful, and did not look so much like the woman who broke my father's heart. The only place I ever felt I truly existed was in this house. Specifically, in Grandpa Walter's study. The house was not just wood and brick to me, it was a living thing. It was a 2-story colonial that creaked in the wind and smelled of lemon polish and old paper. It belonged to my grandfather, Walter Hartman, a man who never looked at me with pity, only pride. He used to sit me down in his heavy leather armchair, the one that smelled of pipe tobacco, and point to the walls. "This house is yours, Lena," he would whisper, like it was a secret between conspirators. "The world is hard, but this place will always be your safe harbor." When Walter died during my junior year of college, my world tilted on its axis. I was grieving, buried in exams, and too young to understand the mechanics of death and inheritance. Richard and Marla told me they were handling it. They told me the house automatically reverted to my father as the only son, They told me the paperwork was a messy, tangled nightmare that I did not need to worry my pretty little head about. I trusted them. Why would I not? They were my parents. They were the ones who stayed. So I went out into the world. I built a career at Northbridge Analytics. I became obsessed with data, with facts, with numbers that did not lie. I worked 80-hour weeks. I climbed the ladder, and then, in a moment of weakness, I fell for a man who felt like excitement but turned out to be a liability. My marriage was a whirlwind that ended in a crash of gambling debts and maxed-out credit cards. I lost nearly everything in the divorce. My confidence was shattered. That was when Richard and Marla swooped in with their charity. "Come home, Lena," they had said. "Get back on your feet. We are family." It felt like a lifeline, but looking back, it was a lasso. They moved me into the guest room, not my old room, because Marla had turned my childhood bedroom into her meditation space. The condition was simple. I was an adult, so I had to pay my share. They were not running a charity. After all, paying my share started as $500 a month for groceries and utilities. Reasonable. Then the furnace died in the middle of January. Dad sat me down, looking gray and stressed, saying he did not have the liquidity to fix it. I wrote the check for $7,000. Then the roof needed to be replaced. $12,000. I paid it. Then came the property taxes. The kitchen remodel Marla insisted was necessary for the property value. The landscaping, the plumbing overhaul. Over the last 3 years, my share had morphed into complete financial stewardship of the household. I was pouring my salary into the foundation of this house while Marla bought designer handbags, and my father leased a luxury sedan he drove to the country club. Every time I tried to push back, every time I suggested that maybe I should save for my own apartment, Marla would weaponize my past. "After everything we did for you," she would say, her voice trembling with manufactured hurt. "We opened our doors when you were on the street. Your father worked his whole life for this house. Are you really going to be selfish? Just like your mother?" That was the kill shot. Always. The accusation that I was becoming Elaine. So I paid. I paid to prove I was good. I paid to prove I was not her. But as I stood there in the dining room, watching the snow melt on the shoulders of the woman in the dark coat, tiny shards of memory began to prick at my mind. Glitches in the narrative I had accepted for so long. I remembered coming home early from work once and seeing a letter on the hall table addressed to me from a law firm I did not recognize. By the time I came out of the bathroom, it was gone. When I asked Dad, he said I must have imagined it, that it was probably junk mail he had tossed. I remembered walking past the master bedroom late one night and hearing Marla hiss, "She is not allowed to know yet. Richard, keep her away from that file cabinet." I remembered every time I asked about Elaine. The story got more elaborate. She stole the silver. She stole the stocks. She emptied the joint accounts. She never called. She never wrote. Yet, the woman standing before me did not look like a thief who had been living the high life in California. Elaine Carter looked tired. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of hard years. Not easy ones. Her coat was high quality but old. She did not look like a monster. She looked like a woman who had walked through a storm to get here. A dangerous radioactive thought bloomed in my mind. If they lied about who owned the house, what else did they lie about? Marla had gone rigid. Her face, usually so mobile and expressive, was a mask of pure terror. The color had drained out of her completely, leaving her rouge standing out like clown makeup. My father was worse. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. He was gripping the back of a chair, his knuckles white. "You should not be here," Richard stammered. His voice was high and thin, lacking any of the authority he usually projected. "Elaine, you gave up your rights. You left." Elaine did not shout. She did not scream. She simply took a step forward, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. The sound was like a gavel striking a desk. "I have been silent for 20 years. Richard," she said. Her voice was low, vibrating with a controlled anger that felt more dangerous than Marla's screeching. I stayed away because you told me it was the only way to keep her safe. You told me my presence would only confuse her. You told me you would protect her inheritance. She looked at me again. Her eyes lingered on the cut on my cheek, the blood that I was still stemming with the napkin. A muscle in her jaw jumped. I stayed away, Elaine continued, turning her gaze back to my father, pinning him to the spot. But I am not going to stand by and watch you destroy the one thing Walter made sure you could not touch. I am not going to watch you steal from my daughter. My father opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked at Marla for help, but Marla was too busy staring at the briefcase on the table as if it contained a bomb. I did not leave because I wanted to. Lena, Elaine said, speaking to me, but never taking her eyes off the man who had lied to me for 3 decades. And I certainly did not take a dime. The room spun, the foundation of my life, the story of the good father and the bad mother, cracked and splintered. I looked at the woman I had hated my entire life, and then at the father I had bankrupted myself to please. What does that mean? I asked. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. What is in the briefcase? Elaine reached out and unsnapped the latches. Click, click. The sound echoed in the silent room. The truth, she said, and the deed. The dinner party dissolved, not with a bang, but with a frantic, humiliating whimper. My Aunt Sarah was the first to break the paralysis. She mumbled something incoherent about the weather turning and needing to beat the snowplows. Grabbing her coat with trembling hands, my cousins followed her lead, eyes fixed firmly on the floor, terrified of making eye contact with either the bleeding woman or the ghost who had just walked in from the cold. They shuffled out the front door like refugees fleeing a war zone, leaving behind half-eaten roast duck and the heavy, suffocating silence of a family secret finally detonating. My father, Richard, stood by the door, closing it after them with a softness that enraged me. He was trying to be gentle with the door, as if being quiet now would somehow undo the violence of the last 10 minutes. "This is my house," Marla announced the moment the latch clicked. Her voice was shrill, trying to reclaim the authority she had lost the moment Elaine crossed the threshold. She pointed a manicured finger at my mother. "You have no right to be here. You are trespassing. Richard, tell her she is trespassing." Richard turned, his face the color of old ash. He looked at Elaine, then at Marla, and finally at me. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He looked pathetic. "We are going to talk," Elaine said. It was not a request. "In private." "We are doing no such thing," Marla screeched, stepping forward to block the hallway. "You do not give orders here, Elaine. You gave up that right when you abandoned this family 20 years ago." "Stop it," I said. My voice was hoarse, but it cut through the noise. I stepped between them, the napkin still pressed to my face. It was sodden with blood now, warm and sticky against my palm. "We are going to the study." "The study?" Marla laughed, a jagged, nervous sound. "That is my relaxation room now. You are not dragging your mud into my—" "I said we are going to the study," I repeated, turning my cold gaze on my stepmother. "Unless you want me to call the police right now and file an assault charge for this," I gestured to my cheek with my free hand. "I think the officers would be very interested in why you threw a crystal plate at my face." Marla's mouth snapped shut. Her eyes darted to the phone sitting on the sideboard. She knew I had the leverage. I didn't wait for her permission. I grabbed Elaine's arm. The fabric of her coat felt rough and real, grounding me, and pulled her toward the back of the house. I could feel Marla's hatred burning into my back, but she didn't follow. Not yet. We entered the study, and I closed the heavy oak door, turning the lock. The silence that fell over the room was immediate. This room used to be my sanctuary. When Grandpa Walter was alive, it smelled of pipe tobacco, old leather, and cedar. It was dark, cozy, and lined with books from floor to ceiling. Now, it was unrecognizable. Marla had painted the rich wood paneling a bland, inoffensive beige. She had replaced the heavy velvet drapes with sheer white linen and swapped Grandpa's mahogany desk for a glass and chrome table that looked like it belonged in a nail salon. But in the corner, hidden behind a decorative silk screen she must have put there to hide the eyesore, was the old metal filing cabinet. It was the one thing she hadn't been able to move. I slumped into the desk chair, the adrenaline finally crashing. My hands started to shake. "Let me see it," Elaine said softly. She didn't sit. She walked over to the minibar Marla had installed, one of the few useful additions, and wrapped some ice cubes in a clean handkerchief she pulled from her pocket. She gently pulled the bloody napkin away from my cheek. I winced, drawing a sharp breath. "It is deep," she murmured, her eyes scanning the wound with a clinical, protective intensity. "But it missed the eye. You will need stitches, Lena, but it will heal." She pressed the ice pack against my skin. The cold was shocking, but it numbed the throbbing heat. "Why are you here, Elaine?" I asked, staring up at her. "And do not tell me it is just for the holidays. You have been gone for 2 decades. You cannot just walk in and play nurse." "I told you," she said, her voice steady. "I came because of the house." She reached for her leather briefcase, which she had carried in with her, and pulled out a printed sheet of paper. She slid it across the glass desk toward me. It was a real estate listing. My stomach dropped. It was a printout from a private listing service, not the public sites. There was no photo of the front of the house, only the interior, the kitchen I had paid to remodel, the living room with the new floors I had financed. Private listing, Briarwood Estate, motivated sellers, cash offers only, closing requested within 30 days. But it was the notes section at the bottom that made the bile rise in my throat. Occupancy, immediate possession available post-closing. Adult daughter currently residing on premises is vacating by January 31st. I stared at the date, January 31st. "They knew," I whispered. "They knew they were kicking me out before tonight. They have been planning this." "They have been planning it for months," Elaine confirmed. "I have a friend in real estate in Chicago. She flagged this for me because she knows the address. She knows the history." Elaine's finger tapped the paper. "Motivated sellers looking for cash usually means one thing. Lena, they are desperate. They need the money, and they need it before anyone looks too closely at the title." "But the title is in Dad's name," I said, though the conviction was draining out of me with every second. "He inherited it when Grandpa died. That is what they told me. That is why I have been paying the taxes. It is his house." Elaine looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her composure. A flash of profound sadness crossed her face. "Oh, Lena," she sighed. "Is that what they told you?" "Yes. They said the probate was messy. They said it just transferred over." "Walter Hartman did not leave this house to Richard," Elaine said firmly. "Walter knew exactly who his son was. He knew Richard was weak. He knew Richard had a gambling problem even back then, long before you met your ex-husband, and he certainly did not trust Marla." She paused, letting the words sink in. "This house is held in a living trust," she said, "the Walter Hartman Family Trust, and according to the terms of that trust, upon Walter's death, the property did not go to Richard. It went into a holding pattern until you turned 25. You, Lena, you are the sole beneficiary." My brain stuttered. I tried to process the information, but it collided with 30 years of indoctrination. "That is impossible," I argued, my voice trembling. "If the house was mine, I would have known. I would have signed papers. I helped Dad with Grandpa's office after the funeral. I organized the boxes." Then, a memory flashed, bright and sharp. I was 21, home from college for the funeral. I was sitting right here, in this room, sorting through stacks of yellowed paper. Richard had come in, sweating, carrying a cup of coffee. He had taken the stack of files from my hands. "This is all boring legal jargon, honey," he had said, smiling that charming, helpless smile of his. "Probate stuff. It will bore you to tears. Why don't you go catch up with your friends? Let your old man handle the headaches. You just grieve." I had thanked him. I had actually thanked him for taking the burden off my shoulders. "He hid it," I whispered. The realization made me feel sick. "He took the files." "He did more than hide it," Elaine said. When we divorced, Lena, I did not just leave. We made a deal, a legal agreement. I walked away from my share of the marital assets, the savings, the stocks, the car, everything. I left with nothing but my clothes and my paints. In exchange, Richard agreed that he would never touch this house. It was to remain secured for you, kept safe by your grandfather's trust. She looked around the room, her eyes hardening as she took in the beige walls. I thought I was buying your future, she said bitterly. I thought if I removed myself, Marla would stop seeing you as a threat, and Richard would finally step up. I thought giving them the money would be enough to satisfy them. But greed is a hole that has no bottom. But the mail, I grasped at straws, trying to find a logical error in her story. I was an analyst. I needed the data to fit. The trust would send reports, annual statements, tax documents. I have lived here for 3 years. I have never seen a single letter from a trust. Think, Lena, Elaine urged. Have you really never seen anything? Or did you just never get to the mailbox first? Another memory surfaced. I was cooking dinner about 6 months ago. Marla had come in from the front porch with a stack of mail. She had been flipping through it. I saw a thick envelope with a return address from a law firm downtown. Is that for me? I had asked. Just junk, Marla had said, tossing it into the trash compactor before I could reach for it. Solicitations. They think because you are divorced you need a lawyer. Vultures. And another time, a letter on the hall table that vanished an hour later, Dad claiming he must have accidentally picked it up with his work papers. They intercepted it, I said. The anger was starting to replace the shock. It was a cold, calculating anger. They changed the mailing address to the house. Knowing I was too busy working to pay for their lifestyle to check the mail in the morning, they have been shredding my mail. And it is not just the mail, Elaine said. She leaned closer. 2 weeks ago, the trustee, an old friend of Walter's who is practically retired, called me. He was concerned. He said Richard had called him, asking hypothetical questions. What kind of questions? Questions about whether the trust allows the property to be used as collateral for a loan, Elaine said. Questions about whether the beneficiary, you, could sign over rights to a third party, as. I closed my eyes. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture so ugly I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The refinance inquiry, I said, opening my eyes. My colleague at work texted me at dinner. He said there was a flag on my credit report for a property appraisal at this address, a rush order. Richard is trying to borrow against the house, Elaine concluded. He cannot sell it legally because the title isn't in his name, so he is trying to find a loophole, or, she hesitated. Or what? Or he is trying to pretend he is you. I stared at the filing cabinet in the corner, the one behind the silk screen. The key, I said suddenly. What? Grandpa always hid the key to that cabinet. I stood up, my legs unsteady but holding. I walked over to the built-in bookshelves on the far wall. He had a loose panel behind the encyclopedias. He showed me when I was 7. He said it was our secret. I pushed aside the silk screen Marla had erected. The cabinet was gray steel, dented and old, locked. I turned to the bookshelf. Marla had removed the encyclopedias and replaced them with decorative vases, but the shelf structure was the same. I reached under the lip of the third shelf, my fingers groping blindly. Wood, dust, and then cold metal. I pulled it out, a small brass key. Tape had held it there for 20 years, yellowed and brittle, but it held. He never found it, I said, a strange sob catching in my throat. Dad never found the spare key. I walked to the cabinet and inserted the key. It turned with a stiff clack. I pulled the top drawer open. It was stuffed with papers, not organized like Grandpa would have kept them, but shoved in haphazardly. I started pulling them out. Unopened envelopes addressed to Lena Hartman, bank statements, notices from the county assessor, and at the bottom, a folder labeled Trust Correspondence. I opened one of the bank statements. My eyes scanned the numbers. It wasn't just a refinance attempt. There was already a line of credit open, a home equity line of credit. $78,000, I read aloud. My voice was flat. There is a balance of $78,000 on a line of credit secured by this property. I looked at the name on the statement. Borrower, Lena Hartman. I had never applied for this loan. He didn't just try to sell it, I said, turning to Elaine. The room felt like it was shrinking. He stole my identity. He took out a loan in my name, using my house as collateral. Marla, Elaine said, her voice hard. Richard does not have the stomach for this level of fraud on his own. He is weak. He bends. But Marla breaks things. I looked toward the door. Through the gap at the bottom, I could see a shadow. Someone was standing just outside in the hallway. Marla. She wasn't screaming anymore. She wasn't banging on the door. She was silent. I walked to the door and pressed my ear against the wood. I could hear the faint, rapid tap-tap-tap of fingernails on a screen. Texting. She was texting furiously. She is planning her next move, I said, stepping back. She knows we are in here. She knows the game is up. She is dangerous, Lena, Elaine warned. A cornered animal will bite, and she has Richard wrapped around her finger. He will do whatever she tells him to do to save his own skin. I looked at the pile of stolen mail on the desk, the evidence of my father's betrayal. He had watched me work 80 hours a week. He had watched me pay his bills. He had watched me exhaust myself to keep this roof over our heads, all while he was secretly draining the equity out of the one thing that was actually mine. He hadn't just failed to protect me. He had actively cannibalized me. I need to know one thing, Elaine said, grabbing my shoulders and forcing me to look at her. This is crucial. Lena, think back. Think carefully. In the last year, has Marla or Richard ever asked you to sign anything? Anything at all? A tax document? A receipt? A birthday card that looked odd? My mind raced back. The fatigue. The busy mornings rushing to the train station. 3 months ago, I said slowly, Marla caught me at breakfast. She was frantic. Said the accountant needed a signature for the household tax return extension. She said since I was contributing to the bills, I needed to sign as a resident. Did you read it? I was late, I admitted, shame burning my gut. The car was waiting. She had the pages clipped together. She just flipped to the signature page. I signed it. Elaine closed her eyes and let out a long, shaky breath. You didn't sign a tax return, Lena, she said grimly. You signed a power of attorney, or the loan application itself. The shadow under the door moved. The texting stopped. Open the door, I said. Lena, wait. No, I said. I picked up the stack of stolen mail in one hand and the ice pack in the other. I am done waiting. I am done being the good daughter. I walked to the door and unlocked it. The hallway was empty. Marla was gone. But from the kitchen, I could hear the low murmur of voices. She was talking to someone. Not Richard. Someone else. We need to fix this, I heard her hiss. Tonight, before she figures out the rest. I looked at Elaine. The woman who had been the villain of my childhood story was now the only person standing between me and total ruin. Call your lawyer, I told her. We are going to need backup. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow, stopping my breath in my throat. It had been a Tuesday morning in late October. I remembered it because it was raining. A cold, miserable drizzle that turned the Briarwood streets into gray slush. I had been running late for a quarterly review meeting, rushing around the kitchen trying to find my travel mug, my mind already halfway to the office. Marla had been there, standing by the kitchen island, looking uncharacteristically frazzled. She was holding a stack of papers, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Lena, honey, thank God you are still here, she had said. Stepping into my path, I completely forgot about this, and the accountant is going to kill me. I need you to sign the household residency verification for the tax extension. Richard already signed, but since you are contributing to utilities now, they need your signature too. I remembered the urgency in her voice. I remembered glancing at the clock on the microwave. I had 6 minutes to catch the 7:15 train. Where do I sign? I had asked, grabbing the pen she offered. She had flipped the pages for me, holding the thick stack down with her left hand so only the signature lines were visible. Here, and here, an initial here. I had signed my name 3 times in blue ink, thanked her for handling the taxes, and ran out the door into the rain. I had not read a single line of text above the signature block. I had trusted her. I had trusted that despite her snide comments and our Cold War, she would not commit a felony against me before I had even finished my morning coffee. Standing in the study now, with the ice pack dripping cold water onto my hand, I looked at Elaine. The realization must have shown on my face because her expression hardened. "What is it, Lena?" she asked sharply. "October," I whispered. "She made me sign something in October. She said it was for taxes. She said the accountant needed it immediately." Elaine cursed under her breath. A sharp, harsh sound I had never heard from her before. "You need a lawyer," she said. "Right now, not tomorrow, tonight." "I have one," I said, my hand diving into my pocket for my phone. Jordan Blake was not just my divorce attorney. He was my oldest friend. We had gone to undergrad together before he went to law school, and I went into finance. He was a partner now at Apex Monroe Law Group, a shark in a bespoke suit who specialized in forensic accounting and high-conflict divorces. He was the one who had warned me, repeatedly, not to move back in with Richard and Marla. I dialed his number. It was Christmas night. I prayed he was not on a flight to Aspen. He picked up on the second ring. "Lena? Merry Christmas. Please tell me you are calling to say you have finally moved out of that house." "Jordan, I need you to listen to me," I said. My voice was trembling, but I forced it to steady. "I need you to switch to lawyer mode, immediately." The playfulness vanished from his voice instantly. "I am listening. Are you safe?" "Physically, yes, but I took a deep breath. "I think my father and stepmother have committed identity theft against me and mortgage fraud, and they are trying to sell the house." I quickly outlined everything: Elaine's arrival, the trust revelation, the refinance inquiry text from my colleague, and the papers I had blindly signed in October. "Okay," Jordan said. His tone was clipped, professional, and terrifyingly serious. "Here is what you are going to do. Do not confront them yet. Do not scream. Do not give them a chance to destroy evidence. If they are desperate enough to forge documents, they are desperate enough to shred them." "Marla is in the kitchen," I said. "I can hear her." From down the hall, the sound of clattering dishes echoed. Marla was making a show of cleaning up, banging pots and pans, likely loud enough to cover up whatever hushed conversation she was having with my father. She was playing the martyr, the victim of my outburst, while simultaneously creating a wall of noise. "Good," Jordan said. "Let her make noise. I need you to find the paper trail. Banks do not just lend money on a signature. They send confirmations. They send statements. If there is a loan in your name, there is mail. Find it." "We are looking," I said. "I will call you back." I hung up and turned to the filing cabinet. The top drawer we had opened was full of old utility bills and junk mail. It was the decoy drawer. "Richard has a safe," I said, scanning the room. "But he changed the combination years ago." "He does not use the safe for the important things," Elaine said, moving toward the heavy oak bookshelf on the far wall. "Walter never did. He said safes were the first place burglars looked." Elaine ran her hand under the bottom lip of the massive bookshelf. It was a built-in unit, solid oak, spanning the entire wall. "Your grandfather had a hollow space cut into the baseboard molding behind here," she whispered, her fingers searching. "He kept the key to the bottom file drawer there. He said it was for eyes-only documents." I watched her. A woman I barely knew yet knew intimately, navigating the secrets of my childhood home better than I did. "Got it," she breathed. She pulled out a small, silver key. It was smaller than the brass one I had found earlier. She tossed it to me. I caught it, the metal biting into my palm. I knelt before the file cabinet and inserted the key into the bottom drawer lock. It turned with a smooth, well-oiled click. Marla had been maintaining this lock. even if she neglected the rest of the house. I pulled the drawer open. It was not a mess like the top drawer. It was organized with terrifying precision. Hanging folders, color-coded, and right at the front, a thick red folder labeled L.H. Financials. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lift the folder out. I placed it on the glass desk and opened it. The first thing I saw was a letter from the bank, First National of Illinois. Dear Ms. Hartman, congratulations on the approval of your home equity line of credit in the amount of $150,000. $150,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. They hadn't just taken a little, they had leveraged a massive chunk of the home's equity. I flipped the page. There was the application, and there, at the bottom, was my signature. It looked like mine. The loop of the L was perfect, the sharp cross of the T. But looking closely, under the harsh light of the desk lamp, I could see the hesitation marks. The ink was slightly heavier in the curves, where someone had paused to check their work against a reference. It is a forgery, I whispered. It is a good one, but it is a forgery. Keep digging, Elaine said, her voice tight. She was standing by the door, listening for Marla. I dug deeper. Beneath the approval letter were the withdrawal records. November 2nd, $12,000 transferred to Opal Lux Studios. November 15th, $8,000 cash withdrawal. December 1st, $5,000 transferred to Colton Reyes Consulting. They were bleeding the equity dry, and then, at the very bottom of the stack, I found the one document that made my heart stop completely. It was an envelope with a red stamp on the front. Final notice, action required. I pulled out the letter. It was dated 3 days ago. Dear Ms. Hartman, this letter serves as formal notice that your home equity line of credit is in default. You have missed 3 consecutive payments. Unless the past due balance of $4,200 is received by January 15th, the bank will exercise its right to accelerate the loan and initiate foreclosure proceedings on the collateral property located at 412 Oak Street. I stared at the paper. The words foreclosure proceedings seemed to float off the page and slap me. They are not just selling the house because they want to downsize, I said, my voice sounding hollow. They are selling it because the bank is about to take it. I held up the letter for Elaine to see. They stopped making payments. They took the cash, spent it, and now they are letting the loan default. If they do not sell the house in January, the bank takes it, and since the loan is in my name, the bank comes after you for the deficiency, Elaine finished, her face pale, and the trust loses the house. I grabbed my phone and snapped photos of every single document, the approval letter, the transfer records, the fake signatures, the foreclosure threat. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped, replaced by a cold, focused rage. I was an analyst. I dealt with worst-case scenarios for a living. This was just data, ugly, criminal data. I sent the batch to Jordan with a text. I never signed any of this. The signatures are traced. They are in default. They are about to lose the house. Jordan's video call request came through 10 seconds later. I propped the phone up against a stack of books so Elaine and I could both see him. Jordan was sitting in his home office, wearing a hoodie, but his face was pure litigation attorney. I got the images, he said without preamble. Lena, listen to me very carefully. This is a Class A felony. This is not a family dispute anymore. This is aggravated identity theft and bank fraud involving a trust instrument. They spent the money, I said. There are transfers to businesses I have never heard of, a studio, a consultant. We will trace the funds later, Jordan said, dismissing the money. Right now, the fire is the default notice. If the bank thinks you are the borrower, they are going to come for your personal assets. Your salary can be garnished. Your credit score will be incinerated. You could lose your securities license. I felt sick. My license was my livelihood. What do I do? We need to freeze everything, Jordan said. I am going to draft an affidavit of forgery tonight. We need to file a police report immediately to establish the timeline. But more importantly, We need to stop that sale. If they sell the house to a third party, untangling the title will take years. They have a viewing scheduled for after New Year's, Elaine added, stepping into the frame. They are pushing for a cash close. Jordan looked at Elaine, his eyes narrowing slightly, assessing her. You are the mother? I am, Elaine said. You are a witness, Jordan corrected. You saw the house listing. You saw the intent. Lena, I need you to be an actor for the next 48 hours. You cannot let them know you found these papers. If they know you have the evidence, they might run, or worse, they might try to coerce you physically. Marla already threw a plate at me, I reminded him, touching the bandage on my face. Exactly, Jordan said. So we know she is volatile. We need to corner them legally before we corner them physically. I will contact the trust administrator first thing in the morning. We will alert the bank's fraud department. But until we drop the hammer, you need to play dumb. Play dumb? I looked at the foreclosure notice. Jordan, they are destroying my life. I know, Jordan said softly. But if you scream at them tonight, they lawyer up tomorrow, and if they get a criminal defense attorney before we secure the evidence, they will claim you authorized it verbally. They will claim you were helping the family. It becomes a he said, she said mess. We need indisputable proof that they acted with malice. Elaine placed a hand on my shoulder. Her grip was strong. He is right, Lena. We need to trap them. I looked at the screen, then at the red folder. I thought about my father. I thought about how he had looked at me across the dinner table, letting Marla humiliate me, knowing full well he had stolen my identity to fund her shopping sprees. Okay, I said. I can play dumb. Get out of the house if you can, Jordan advised. Is there somewhere you can go? No, I said firmly. If I leave, they win. Possession is 9/10 of the law, right? I am staying right here. Then lock your door, Jordan said. I will start drafting the complaints. I will see you tomorrow. The call ended. The room fell silent again. Elaine looked at me. Her eyes filled with a pain so deep it looked physical. She reached out and touched the edge of the desk that had belonged to her father-in-law, the man who had tried to protect me when she couldn't. I am so sorry, Lena, she whispered. I thought leaving would stop the fighting. I thought Richard would at least be a father. I was so wrong. I left you with wolves. You are here now, I said. I closed the red folder and slid it back into the drawer. I locked it. Then I put the key in my pocket. And we are not going to let the wolves eat. I walked to the door and unlocked it. I could still hear Marla in the kitchen, the aggressive clatter of pans having subsided to a low, rhythmic scrubbing. What is the plan? Elaine asked. We put everything back exactly how we found it, I said, looking around the room. We wipe our fingerprints, and tomorrow morning, I am going to wake up, make coffee, and apologize to Marla for ruining her dinner party. Elaine looked at me, a slow, sharp smile spreading across her face. It was a dangerous smile. It was the smile of a woman who had nothing left to lose. You are definitely my daughter, she said. We turned off the lights in the study, leaving the ghosts of my grandfather and the evidence of my father's crimes in the dark, and stepped back out into the hallway to begin the performance of a lifetime. The next morning, the house was quiet with the heavy, suffocating silence of a crime scene. Marla had left early, claiming she had a post-holiday spa appointment to recover from the stress of my outburst. My father was locked in the garage, tinkering with his car, hiding from the reality of the woman in the guest room and the daughter he had betrayed. This gave us the run of the house. I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open, a mug of black coffee cooling untouched beside my hand. Elaine sat opposite me, her posture rigid, on the screen. Jordan's face was pixelated but grim. He had not slept. I could tell by the dark circles under his eyes and the way he was nursing a Red Bull. I have been digging through the county recorder's database since 4 a.m, Jordan said, his voice tinny through the laptop speakers. And I found the smoking gun, or at least, the first one. He pulled up a document on his screen and shared it. Richard and Marla signed a listing agreement with Silvercrest Realty Partners 3 days ago, Jordan explained. It is an exclusive right-to-sell contract. They listed the asking price at 20% below market value for a quick sale. The terms specify as-is condition. Cash offers preferred. Closing to happen immediately after the new year. They are practically giving it away, I murmured, looking at the numbers. Why the rush? Because they are out of options, Jordan said. I found something else. 6 months ago, a formal application was submitted to refinance the mortgage on the property. It was submitted by Richard Hartman. And? And it was denied, Jordan said. The title search flagged the trust. The underwriter saw that Richard was not the owner, just the trustee, and the trust documents explicitly forbid encumbering the asset for personal debt. The bank killed the deal. I leaned back, the cold wood of the chair pressing against my spine. So they tried to do it legally. They tried to borrow against the house to pay off whatever debts they have, and the trust stopped them. Exactly, Jordan said. And that is when Marla got creative. When the front door was locked, she decided to break a window. If they could not borrow against the house as Richard, they needed the beneficiary to do it. They needed you. So they opened the home equity line of credit in my name, I said, feeling the nausea rise again. Because as the beneficiary, I theoretically have the power to leverage the asset if I can prove it is for the benefit of the trust. They forged my signature to bypass the restrictions. We need to look at where the money went, Elaine said, her voice sharp. Lena, you said the statement showed a balance of $78,000? $78,412, I corrected. Reciting the number burned into my memory. And that was as of the last statement. It could be higher now. I have a contact in the fraud department at First National, Jordan said. I called in a favor. I cannot get the official statements without a subpoena, which we will get, but he gave me a verbal rundown of the transaction history. It is illuminating. Tell me, I said. Jordan hesitated. It is not pretty. Lena, you need to know that this money did not go to fixing the roof or paying the heating bill. You paid those. Just tell me, Jordan. The card issued on the account has been used aggressively in the last 3 months. Jordan read from his notes. High-end boutiques on Michigan Avenue, $3,000 at Gucci, $2,000 at a medical spa in the Gold Coast, $4,000 for a consulting fee to a travel agency. I closed my eyes. While I was eating instant noodles for lunch to save money for the property tax bill, Marla was spending $3,000 on handbags using credit she stole from me. There is more, Jordan continued. There are significant cash withdrawals, $500 here, $800 there, all from ATMs located in or near the Riverside Casino. Richard, Elaine whispered, he never stopped gambling. It gets worse, Jordan said. Those are the small amounts. The big chunks were transferred via wire. There were 4 transfers of $5,000 each to a business entity called Opal Lux Studios. Opal Lux, I repeated, the name sounding familiar. Then it clicked. That is Marla's sister. She opened a salon 2 towns over last year. Marla told me it was a huge success. It is failing, Jordan said. I checked the business filings. They are being sued by their landlord for back rent. It looks like Marla was funneling your equity into her sister's sinking ship. And the rest? I asked. That does not add up to $78,000. The rest, Jordan said, his voice dropping an octave, went to an individual account. Recurring payments of $2,000 a week for the last 10 weeks. The recipient is a man named Colton Reyes. I frowned. I know that name. Marla introduced him to Dad at a barbecue last summer. She called him her business advisor. She said he was helping her structure a portfolio. He is not an advisor, Jordan said dryly. I ran a background check. Colton Reyes is a 28-year-old personal trainer with a record for passing bad checks. And judging by his social media presence, he and Marla are very close. The silence in the kitchen was heavy. The picture was completing itself, and it was grotesque. My father was gambling again. Marla was funding a failing business and a young lover, and they were stripping my inheritance, my future, to pay for it all. They are not just desperate, I said, my voice trembling with rage. They are parasites. They are eating the house from the inside out. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from my cousin, Mike. Hey, Lena. Just checking in. Mom told us about what happened at dinner. I am sorry you are going through a hard time mentally. Maybe you should see someone? Marla said you have been throwing things for weeks. Hope you get help. I stared at the screen, my grip tightening on the phone until my knuckles turned white. She is spinning it, I said, showing the text to Elaine. She is telling the family I am unstable. She is planting the seeds so that when I try to fight them, no one will believe me. She is turning the victim into the villain. That is her playbook, Elaine said bitterly. She did the exact same thing to me 20 years ago. She told everyone I was depressed, that I was erratic, that I was unfit. By the time I left, even I almost believed it. Elaine stood up abruptly. We need into their computer, the desktop in the den. It is password protected, I said. Dad uses a combination of his birthday and his old jersey number, Elaine finished. 11. He never changes anything. We walked into the den, the room that used to be Grandpa's study. I sat at the desk where I had found the hidden key the night before. I woke up the computer. The login screen appeared. I typed in Richie 11. Access denied. I tried Marla Loves Rich. Access denied. Elaine leaned over my shoulder. Try Victory. I looked at her. Victory? It was the name of the boat he always wanted but could never afford, she said. I typed in Victory. The screen unlocked. My stomach twisted. Elaine knew him better than I did. She knew the ghosts that haunted him. I went straight to the email browser. It was logged into a shared family account, but there were subfolders. I clicked on the Sent folder. Most of it was mundane, bills, fake pleasantries to neighbors. But then I saw an email sent 2 days ago. The subject line was simply, Timeline. The recipient was Colton Reyes 8888 gmail.com. I clicked it open. Colton, baby. Do not worry about the delay. The open house is set for the 2nd. We have a cash buyer lined up from the city who wants a quick close. Once the papers are signed and the wire hits, I am done. I will transfer the bulk to the offshore account we discussed. Richard thinks we are buying a condo in the Loop, but I am not sticking around for the fallout. Once the bank realizes the girl's credit is torched and the house is gone, it is going to be a bloodbath. Let Richard and the little brat deal with the wreckage. I will meet you in Cabo on the 15th. Just make sure the tickets are in your name. Love, M. I read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't just theft. It wasn't just greed. It was an exit strategy. She is leaving him, I whispered. She is going to sell the house, steal the proceeds, and leave Dad to face the fraud charges and the foreclosure alone. She is going to frame him and me for everything. Elaine stared at the screen, her face unreadable. She is going to destroy you both. She takes the money, you lose the house and your credit, and Richard goes to prison. Or I go to prison, I said. The loan is in my name. If she disappears with the money, the bank will sue me. I will be the one on the hook for $78,000 plus the legal fees. I will be bankrupt. Jordan, I called out to the laptop which I had carried into the den. Did you hear that? I heard it, Jordan said, and his voice was cold as ice. Screenshot that email, print it, save it to a thumb drive. That is evidence of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and premeditated embezzlement. So what do we do? I asked. Do we call the police now? Do we stop the sale? If we stop the sale now, Jordan explained, his lawyer brain clicking into high gear. The bank still proceeds with the foreclosure on the current default. We stop the bleeding, but the wound is already infected. We need to clear your name completely. We need to prove that you were a victim, not a co-conspirator. How? If we go to the police today with just this, Jordan said, Marla will claim the email is a fabrication. She will claim you hacked her account. She will claim you authorized the loan and are now having buyer's remorse. It becomes a mess. So we let them hang themselves, Jordan said. We let them walk into that open house. We let them present themselves as the owners to a third party. We let them make the fraudulent representation in front of witnesses, the real estate agent and the buyers, and then, when they are holding the pen to sign the contract, we drop the hammer. I looked at the email again. Let Richard and the little brat deal with the wreckage. I thought about the years I had spent trying to please this woman, the years I had spent trying to buy my father's love by fixing his mistakes. I had been a doormat. I had been a wallet. I am done protecting him, I said. The words tasted like ash, but they also tasted like freedom. Elaine looked at me. Are you sure, Lena? If we do this, Richard goes down too. He signed the listing agreement. He knows about the loan. He made his choice, I said. He chose her over me. He chose to let her steal my identity rather than stand up to her. He is not a victim. Elaine, he is an accomplice. Elaine nodded slowly. He is. I have spent 20 years making excuses for him in my head, telling myself he was just weak. But weakness that hurts others is not weakness. It is malice. She reached out and touched the screen, tracing the words of the email. He lied about me, she said, her voice gaining strength. He told you I abandoned you so he could keep control of the narrative. He isolated you so you would be dependent on him. I am not going to let him finish the job. I am not going to let him ruin the second half of your life like he ruined the first half of mine. We changed the plan, I told Jordan. We do not just block the sale. We expose them. We make it public. Okay, Jordan said. I will prepare the affidavit. I will have the trust documents certified. We need to be ready for the open house. It is scheduled for January 2nd? Yes, I said. That gives us 3 days. Jordan calculated. I need you to be the best actress in the world. Lena, you need to be depressed. You need to be defeated. Make them think they have won. Make Marla feel safe enough to lower her guard. I can do that, I said. I have been practicing being the defeated daughter my whole life. And Elaine? Jordan asked. I will disappear, Elaine said. I will check into that motel down the highway. If Marla thinks I have given up and left, she will get sloppy. Perfect, Jordan said. Gather the evidence, every scrap of paper, every text message. We are building a coffin, and we need every nail. I closed the laptop. I looked around the room. Grandpa's room, the place where he had promised me safety. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a hunter. Mom, I said, testing the word. It felt strange, but right. Pack your bag. We need to put on a show. Elaine smiled, and it was a fierce, terrifying thing. Let's get to work. The advice Jordan gave me was simple, brutal, and completely counterintuitive. Do not fight, he had told me over a secure line while I sat in my car 2 blocks away from the house. If you fight, they put up shields. They lawyer up. They destroy evidence. I need you to be the beaten dog. Lena, I need you to roll over and show your belly. Make them think they have won. Because when narcissists think they have won, they get sloppy. So, I went back into the house and gave the performance of my life. I found Marla in the kitchen, aggressively scrubbing a pot that was already clean. She didn't turn around when I entered. Her shoulders were tight, waiting for the next round of screaming. Marla, I said, my voice small and trembling. I let my shoulders slump. I kept my eyes on the floor. I wanted to apologize. She turned slowly, suspicion narrowing her eyes. For what? For assaulting me with your face? Or for inviting that woman into my home? For everything, I said, swallowing the bile that rose in my throat. You were right. I have been a lot lately. I know I have been leaning on you and Dad too much. I guess the divorce messed me up more than I thought. I ruined Christmas, and I am sorry. I saw the tension drain out of her instantly, replaced by a smug, preening satisfaction. It was sickening to watch. She didn't see a daughter in pain. She saw an opponent conceding defeat. Well, she sniffed, wiping her hands on a towel. It takes a big person to admit when they are wrong. Lena, we just want what is best for you. You know that, right? This house? It is a crutch. You need to be out in the world. standing on your own 2 feet. I know, I whispered. I will start packing. I can be out by the end of January, like you asked. Good, she said, a predatory smile spreading across her face. That is very mature of you, Lena. From that moment on, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The hostility vanished, replaced by a bizarre, manic cheerfulness from Marla. She hummed while she walked through the halls. She talked loudly on her phone about new beginnings and shedding dead weight. She was practically skipping. She thought the obstacle had removed itself. My father, Richard, was a different story. He couldn't look at me. When we passed in the hallway, he would study the baseboards or suddenly find something fascinating on his watch. It is going to be better this way, kiddo, he muttered one evening when I caught him in the kitchen. He smelled of scotch and fear. Once we downsize, get rid of the overhead, we can all breathe again, reset the clock. I am sure, Dad, I said, keeping my voice flat. I am doing this for us, he said, almost pleadingly, though he was talking to the refrigerator door. Not me. You understand that, right? Sometimes you have to make hard calls to save the ship. I understand perfectly, I said, and I did. He wasn't saving the ship. He was drilling holes in the hull to sell the scrap metal, and he was planning to let me drown in the wreckage. The hardest part of the charade was Elaine. We staged her departure the next morning. It had to look real for the neighbors, and more importantly, for Marla, who was watching from the living room window like a hawk. We stood in the driveway, the cold wind whipping our hair. Elaine had her suitcase. I cannot stay where I'm not wanted. Lena, Elaine said loudly, her voice carrying over the frost. I tried, but your father, he is never going to change. I know, Mom, I said, and the tears in my eyes were real, even if the context was fake. You should go. I will be fine. Take care of yourself, she said, pulling me into a hug. Motel 6 off the interstate, she whispered into my ear, her voice barely a breath. Room 112. Jordan is coming down tonight. We will be ready. She pulled away, got into her rental car, and drove off. I stood in the driveway, watching her go, looking like the abandoned daughter Marla wanted me to be. When I turned back to the house, I saw the curtain in the living room twitch. Marla had seen it all. With Elaine gone and me subdued, Marla let her guard down completely. That afternoon, I was sitting on the stairs, hidden by the curve of the banister, when I heard her on the phone in the hallway. I hit record on my phone. Oh, stop worrying. Colton, she was purring. The ex-wife is gone. She left this morning with her tail between her legs. And the girl? Broken. Completely broken. She is packing boxes right now. Pause. Yes, the viewing is set for January 2nd. Silvercrest is bringing a couple from the city, old money. They want a turnkey property and they are ready to pay cash. We will close by the 15th. I promise. As soon as the wire hits the account, I will transfer your cut to the LLC. Pause. No. Richard does not suspect a thing about the transfer. He thinks we are putting it into a joint retirement annuity. By the time he realizes the account is empty, we will be sipping margaritas. Just make sure the tickets are booked. I ended the recording. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was it, the smoking gun. Not only were they selling a house they didn't own, but Marla was actively conspiring to embezzle the proceeds from my father. It was a double cross wrapped in a fraud. I sent the audio file to Jordan immediately. His reply came in 3 minutes later. Got it. This is conspiracy to commit wire fraud. I am adding it to the pile. I have placed a credit freeze on your files with Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. No new accounts can be opened. But we cannot stop the sale just by freezing credit. We need to catch them in the act of misrepresentation. I texted back. The viewing is January 2nd. Silvercrest Realty, cash buyers. Jordan. Perfect. That is the trap. If they present themselves as the owners to a buyer and accept an offer, that is the moment the crime is consummated in front of witnesses. We will be there. The days between Christmas and New Year's blurred into a gray, tense haze. I spent my time in my room, packing boxes that I had no intention of moving. I marked them donations and trash, playing the part of someone purging their life. Marla loved it. She would poke her head in, survey the piles, and offer fake sympathy. "It feels good to declutter, does it not?" she would ask. "Cleansing the spirit." "So cleansing," I would agree. Meanwhile, Jordan was assembling the artillery. He drafted formal letters to the trust administrator and the bank's fraud department, but he didn't send them yet. He wanted the element of surprise. He wanted Marla and Richard to feel safe until the very last second. There was one loose end I needed to tie up: safety. Jordan had warned me that when the trap snapped shut, Marla would panic, and a panicked Marla was physically dangerous. I had the scar on my cheek to prove it. On New Year's Eve, while Richard and Marla were out at a party, spending money they didn't have, I walked next door to Mrs. Klein's house. Mrs. Klein was 70 years old, lived alone, and knew everything that happened on our street. She had been friends with Grandpa Walter. She had watched me grow up. She opened the door, smelling of cinnamon and tea. "Lena, my goodness, what happened to your face?" "I had an accident, Mrs. Klein," I said, stepping onto her porch. "But actually, that is what I wanted to talk to you about. I need a favor, a serious one." I didn't tell her everything. I didn't tell her about the fraud or the embezzlement. I just told her that things were volatile at home, that my stepmother was unstable, and that I was worried about an argument escalating. "There is going to be a meeting at the house on January 2nd, I told her. "Around 10 in the morning, if you hear shouting, if you hear anything that sounds like violence, please do not come over. Just call 911. Mrs. Klein looked at me, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. She reached out and squeezed my hand. "Your grandfather worried about that woman. He told me once, 'Marla has eyes that want more than she has earned. You just say the word, dear. I will have the police on speed dial.'" "Thank you," I said. "Hopefully, it will just be a lot of noise, but I want to be safe." The morning of January 2nd dawned with a deceptive beauty. A fresh layer of snow had fallen overnight, coating Briarwood in a pristine white blanket. The trees looked like lace. The sky was a piercing, innocent blue. Our house looked like a postcard. The red brick contrasted beautifully with the snow. The black shutters gleamed, and the wreath on the door, which Marla had costumed, looked inviting. Inside, the house was a battlefield disguised as a showroom. Marla had been up since 5 in the morning. The house smelled of baking vanilla, a trick she used to make buyers feel at home. Every surface was polished. My boxes were hidden in the garage. "Lena," Marla called from the bottom of the stairs. "They will be here in 20 minutes. Are you dressed? Remember, you are just the daughter who is moving out. You smile, you say hello, and then you make yourself scarce. Go to the library or something." "I am ready," I called back. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was wearing a simple gray sweater and jeans. No makeup, except for the bandage on my cheek. I looked tired. I looked harmless. I checked my phone. "Jordan, we are parked down the street. We will give them 15 minutes to start the pitch. Wait for my signal." I took a deep breath. My hands were steady. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I walked downstairs. Richard was in the living room, wearing his best suit. He looked handsome, but he was sweating. He kept adjusting his tie, pacing back and forth. "Stop fidgeting. Richard," Marla hissed. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere dress that probably cost more than my first car. She looked radiant. "You look guilty. Look successful." "I just want this over with," Richard muttered. "It will be over in an hour," Marla said, "and then we are free." The doorbell rang. Ding dong. It was the same sound that had heralded Elaine's arrival on Christmas. Now, it signaled the beginning of the end. Marla smoothed her dress, put on her best hostess smile, and opened the door. "Welcome," she trilled. "Please, come in out of the cold." A sleek, polished woman in a blazer stepped in first. Leah Morton from Silvercrest Realty. Following her was a couple who oozed money. The man wore a camel hair coat. The woman wore fur. They looked like sharks looking for a tank. Marla, Richard, Leah said, shaking hands. This is Mr. and Mrs. Vanderbilt. They are very excited to see the property. We are delighted to have you, Marla said, ushering them into the foyer. This has been our family home for, almost 20 years. It is full of love. I stepped out from the kitchen, holding a mug of tea. Oh, and this is our daughter, Lena, Marla said, her smile tight. She is just on her way out. She is moving to her own place in the city later this month. The woman, Mrs. Vanderbilt, looked at me. Her eyes lingered on the bandage on my face. Nice to meet you, she said coolly. You too, I said softly. It is a beautiful house. Great bones. My grandfather built it to last. Marla shot me a warning look. Yes, well, Richard has done so much work to modernize it. The kitchen is completely new. Shall we start the tour? Leah suggested. Absolutely, Marla said. Right this way. I hung back, letting them move into the living room. I watched them point at the fireplace. I heard Marla lie about the chimney work. I paid for that. I heard Richard lie about the roof warranty. I held the paperwork for that. I pulled out my phone. I tapped out a single message to Jordan. They are in. Show started. I slipped my phone into my pocket and followed them. A ghost in my own home, waiting for the moment to burn it all down. Leah Morton, the lead agent from Silvercrest Realty, was a shark in a Chanel blazer. She walked through the front door with the confidence of someone who smelled a commission, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood entry. Trailing behind her were the Vanderbilts, a couple in their 50s who reeked of old money and impatience. The husband, wearing a camel hair coat that probably cost more than my annual student loan payments, scanned the foyer with a critical eye, while his wife adjusted her fur collar and offered a tight, practiced smile. The neighborhood is simply charming, Leah said, her voice a smooth, professional purr. And as I mentioned on the phone, the sellers are highly motivated. It is a rare opportunity to get into the zip code at this price point, especially for a cash close. Marla was practically vibrating with excitement. She clasped her hands together, beaming like the benevolent matriarch of a happy, thriving clan. Welcome, welcome, she chirped. Please, come in. We are just so proud of this home. It has been the heart of our family for nearly 20 years. I stood in the shadow of the kitchen archway, holding my lukewarm mug of tea, watching the performance. It was nauseating. Marla guided them into the living room, gesturing grandly at the fireplace. We had the chimney repointed just last autumn, Marla lied effortlessly. Richard insisted, we believe in maintaining the integrity of the structure. I took a sip of tea to hide my grimace. I had paid for the chimney work. It had cost $3,000, and I had to skip a weekend trip with friends to cover it. And the floors? Mrs. Vanderbilt asked, tapping the toe of her boot against the wood. Are these original? Refinished 6 months ago, Richard chimed in, finding his voice. He sounded nervous, too eager. Sanded and stained, top-of-the-line sealant. Another lie. I had written that check too. It is lovely, Leah noted, making a mark on her clipboard. Shall we see the kitchen? They moved past me as if I were a piece of furniture. Marla paused briefly, flashing a tense smile at the visitors. This is our daughter, Lena. As I mentioned, she is just packing up, finally spreading her wings and moving to the city at the end of the month. We are empty nesters at last. Charmed, Mr. Vanderbilt grunted, barely looking at me. Hi, I said softly. Don't mind me. I am just heading out. I fell in step behind them, the silent ghost haunting the tour. I needed to be here. I needed to witness the lies. Jordan had been specific. They need to make the material misrepresentation in front of the buyers. We moved into the kitchen. Marla ran her hand lovingly over the quartz countertops. We did a full remodel 2 years ago, she bragged. New cabinetry, chef-grade appliances. It was a significant investment, but we wanted the best. I remembered the fight over those counters. Marla had demanded the most expensive stone. I had begged for a cheaper alternative because I was the one paying for it. She had called me cheap and ungrateful until I caved. Now, she was claiming the investment as her own. "It shows," Mrs. Vanderbilt said, seemingly impressed. "Is the stove gas or induction?" "Gas," Marla said. "Wolf range." They moved through the dining room, where the ghost of Christmas dinner still lingered for me, and up the stairs. I followed, my heart rate picking up speed. We were getting closer to the trap. "And this," Marla said, throwing open the door to the master bath, "is my pride and joy. We gutted it last winter. Heated floors, rain shower, freestanding tub. It was our little luxury gift to ourselves." I leaned against the door frame, watching her preen. Gift to ourselves. I remembered the overtime I worked that winter. I remembered eating instant oatmeal for dinner for 3 weeks, so the check to the contractor wouldn't bounce. "Very nice," Mr. Vanderbilt said, actually nodding this time. "Turnkey. I like that." "Exactly," Leah said, sensing the deal tightening. "No work needed. You hand over the check. You get the keys. Simple." We went back downstairs and headed toward the back of the house, to the den, Grandpa Walter's study. Marla had staged it perfectly. A fire was crackling in the hearth. The ugly glass desk was polished. The filing cabinet, the one holding the evidence of their crimes, was hidden behind the silk screen again. "This makes a wonderful home office," Leah suggested, gesturing to the bay window. "Or a library." "Richard handles all the household business in here," Marla said, resting a hand on my father's shoulder. "He is very diligent." Leah set her leather portfolio down on the glass desk. "Well, I have to say, the property presents beautifully. My clients are looking for a 30-day close. We have run the preliminary title work based on the info Richard provided, and it looks like the deed is straightforward in his name, so we don't anticipate any snags." There it was, the lie, the actionable fraud. "We are ready to move as fast as you are," Richard said, his voice tight. "We just want a clean break." "Cash offer," Mr. Vanderbilt said. "No mortgage contingency. We can wire the funds within 48 hours of signing." Marla's eyes lit up with a greed so naked it was almost blinding. "That sounds perfect. Absolutely perfect. We are ready to sign whenever you are." Ding dong. The doorbell cut through the air like a knife. Richard jumped, physically flinching. "Who on earth is that?" Marla's smile faltered. "Probably a delivery. Ignore it." "I should check," Richard said, eager to escape the tension of the negotiation, even for a second. "Excuse me one moment." He hurried out of the den. I stayed where I was, leaning against the bookshelf, watching Marla. She was tapping her foot nervously. "Sorry about this," she murmured to the Vanderbilts. "We have been getting so many packages with the move." I heard the front door open. I heard the wind blow in. And then, I heard the silence. Can I help you?" Richard's voice drifted down the hall. It was shaking. "Hello, Richard," a deep professional baritone replied. "We apologize for the interruption. My name is Jordan Blake. I am an attorney with Apex Monroe Law Group." Marla froze. Her head snapped toward the hallway. "And you know my client," Jordan continued. Elaine didn't say a word. The sound of her heels on the hardwood was the only answer. Richard backed into the den, looking pale and sick. Following him was Jordan, looking impeccable in a charcoal suit, holding a thick legal binder, and beside him was Elaine, looking like an avenging angel in her winter coat. Marla's face went from confusion to pure, unadulterated panic. "What is this?" she screeched, abandoning her hostess persona entirely. "You! I told you to stay away. Get out. We have guests." Leah Morton stepped back, her eyes darting between the newcomers and the sellers. She was a professional. She smelled a lawsuit the way a shark smells blood. "Richard, call the police!" Marla yelled, pointing at Elaine. "They are trespassing." "Nobody is trespassing," Jordan said. His voice was calm, measured, and authoritative. He walked right past Marla and stood at the head of the room, near the desk where Leah had placed her portfolio. He looked at Leah. Then he looked at the Vanderbilts. "I apologize for crashing your viewing," Jordan said politely. "But I assume you are here to discuss the purchase of this property?" "We are," Mr. Vanderbilt said, stepping in front of his wife protectively. "Who are you?" "As I said, I am Jordan Blake. I am the attorney representing the legal owner of this estate." Leah frowned. "Excuse me? I have the prelims right here. The owner is Richard Hartman." "That is incorrect," Jordan said. He opened his binder. The sound of the metal rings snapping open echoed in the quiet room. "Mr. Hartman is merely the trustee of the Walter Hartman Family Trust. He is not the beneficiary, and he does not hold the title in his own right." He pulled out a certified document, stamped with the county seal, and slid it across the glass desk toward Leah. "This is a certified copy of the trust instrument," Jordan explained. "As you can see in Section 4, Paragraph B, upon the death of Walter Hartman, the property is held in trust for the sole benefit of his granddaughter." Jordan turned and pointed directly at me. "Lena Hartman." The room went dead silent. Mr. Vanderbilt looked at me. Leah looked at the document, then at me, then at Richard. "Is this true?" Leah asked, her voice icy. It is complicated," Richard stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The paperwork is old. We were in the process of updating it." "It is a lie," Marla shouted, rushing forward. "That trust is 20 years old. It is invalid. Richard is the heir. This is just his bitter ex-wife trying to ruin our sale." "It is not a lie. Marla," I said. I pushed off the bookshelf and walked into the center of the room. "And it is not a misunderstanding." Jordan pulled another stack of papers from his binder. These were the photos I had taken the night before, printed on high-gloss paper. "If the trust documents are complicated," Jordan said, his voice sharpening, "then perhaps you can explain these." He laid the papers out like a royal flush. "This," Jordan said, pointing to the first page, "is a loan application for a home equity line of credit in the amount of $150,000, taken out against this property 3 months ago." "We never authorized that," Marla cried. "The borrower listed is Lena Hartman," Jordan continued, ignoring her. "But Lena Hartman was at work when this was signed, and a forensic handwriting analysis, which we completed this morning, will confirm that this signature is a forgery." He dropped the next page, the bank statement showing the transfers to Opal Lux Studios and Colton Reyes. "And this," Jordan said, looking directly at the Vanderbilts, "shows where the equity from the house you are standing in was siphoned off to, a failing salon and a personal consultant." Marla went white. She looked at Richard, but he was staring at the floor. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "And finally," Jordan said, placing the red-stamped foreclosure notice on top of the pile, "this is the default notice. This property is currently subject to an accelerated foreclosure action because the fraudulent loan has not been paid." Jordan looked at Leah. "Ms. Morton, did your clients know that they were about to enter into a contract for a property that is currently collateral for a fraudulent loan, is in active default, and is being sold by 2 people who do not hold the legal title?" Leah Morton looked like she had swallowed a lemon. She snatched her portfolio off the desk. "No," she said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "They certainly did not." She turned to the Vanderbilts. "We are leaving, now." "Wait," Marla pleaded, grabbing Leah's arm. "Please, it is a mistake. We can fix it. We can sign an affidavit. We just need the cash to clear the—" "Don't touch me," Leah snapped, jerking her arm away. "You lied on the listing agreement. You lied about the title. You wasted my time and you exposed my clients to legal liability." "Mr. Vanderbilt looked at Richard with pure disgust. "You people are sick," he muttered. They marched out of the room, the sound of their footsteps heavy and fast. The front door slammed shut, vibrating the walls of the house. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The dream of the quick close was dead. The escape plan was dead. Marla stood in the center of the room, her chest heaving. Her face was a mask of twisted, ugly rage. She turned slowly to look at me. "You," she whispered, "you ungrateful, spiteful little bitch." "It is over, Marla," I said, my voice steady. "No sale, no Cabo, no exit strategy." "This is my house," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I took care of it. I cooked the meals. I put up with his gambling. I deserve this money." "It is not your house," Elaine said, stepping forward. "It never was. And now, everyone knows it." "Richard!" Marla shrieked, turning on my father. "Do something. Tell them. Tell them you own it." My father looked up. He looked 10 years older than he had 10 minutes ago. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the ghost of the dad I used to love. But then he looked at Jordan's binder, and the fear took over again. Richard stammered. "I didn't know. Marla said—" "Don't you dare put this on me," Marla hissed, advancing on him. "You signed the papers too. Richard, you wanted the money just as bad as I did." "Because you told me we had to," Richard shouted back, his voice weak and whining. "You said it was the only way to fix the debt." Jordan closed his binder with a sharp snap. "This is not a debate," Jordan said. "This is a notification. I have already filed a lis pendens with the county recorder. This property is now frozen. No one can sell it, refinance it, or transfer it until the title dispute and the fraud investigation are resolved." "Investigation?" Marla whispered. "We filed a police report this morning," Jordan said calmly, "for identity theft, wire fraud, and elder financial abuse regarding the trust. Officers will be here shortly to take statements." "No," Marla gasped. "No police. Richard, we cannot have the police." She looked around the room frantically, her eyes landing on the glass desk, the papers, the fireplace. She looked like a trapped animal looking for a hole in the fence. "I am not going to jail for this," she muttered. "I am not going down for this." She lunged. Not at me, but at the desk. She grabbed the stack of papers, the evidence Jordan had laid out, and scrambled toward the fireplace. "Marla, stop!" Richard yelled. "Burn it!" she screamed. "If there is no paper, there is no proof." Jordan didn't move. He didn't have to. "Those are copies, Marla," I said, watching her frantically try to shove the glossy photos into the flames. "We have the originals. We have the digital files. We have the emails." Marla froze, her hand halfway to the fire. She turned to look at me, her face streaked with soot and tears. The mask of the perfect stepmother was gone. The mask of the victim was gone. All that was left was a desperate, greedy woman who realized she had finally lost. "Why couldn't you just leave?" she sobbed, collapsing onto the hearthrug. "Why couldn't you just let us have it?" "Because it wasn't yours to take," I said. I looked at my father. He was slumped in the armchair, his head in his hands. "You should have protected me." "Dad," I said softly, "you should have protected the house. Instead, you let her burn it down." From the distance, faint but growing louder, came the sound of sirens. Mrs. Klein had made the call. The trap had snapped shut, and caught inside were the two people who taught me that family is not about blood, it is about who is holding the knife. The silence that followed the slamming of the front door was not empty, it was heavy, vibrating with the kinetic energy of a bomb that had just detonated, but had not yet finished destroying the foundation. Leah Morton and the Vanderbilts were gone. The check was gone. The escape route to Cabo was gone. Marla stood in the center of the room, her chest heaving. The soot from the fireplace smeared her cheek, ruining the perfect, creamy complexion she spent thousands of dollars maintaining. She looked at the closed door, then slowly turned her head to look at me. Her eyes were not the eyes of a human being anymore. They were the eyes of a cornered rat, black, bead-like, and filled with a terrifying, desperate malice. "You!" she hissed. The word came out like a curse. She took a step toward me, her hands curled into claws. "You ungrateful, spiteful little parasite. You ruined everything. Do you have any idea what you just did? I stopped a felony, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I stopped you from stealing my house. Your house? Marla screamed. The sound tore through the elegant room, ugly and raw. It is not your house. You did not earn a dime of it. You are nothing but a squatter we took in out of pity. You are a leech. Lena, a 32-year-old failure who could not keep a husband and came crawling back to Daddy to pay her bills. I paid the bills. Marla, I shouted back, the dam finally breaking. I paid for the roof over your head. I paid for the heat you are standing in. Because you owed us, she shrieked, advancing on me. We raised you. We fed you. We put clothes on your back when your mother abandoned you. You think writing a few checks makes us even? You owe us your life. And this is how you repay us? By humiliating us in front of the whole town? By bringing the police into our home? You forged my signature, I said, pointing at the papers Jordan had rescued from the fire. You stole my identity. You stole $78,000. Marla laughed. It was a jagged, hysterical sound. I signed your name because you were too stupid to do what was necessary. I was helping you. We needed that money to save this family, to save your father's reputation, and you were too selfish to see it. So I did what had to be done. I took charge. That is what I do. I fix things while you sit around and cry. Elaine stepped in front of me. She moved with a speed I didn't know she possessed, placing herself physically between Marla and me. Do not take another step, Elaine warned, her voice low and dangerous. You touch her again, Marla, and I will not wait for the police. Get out of my way, Marla spat. You have no right to be here. You walked out on this family 20 years ago. You gave up your rights when you chose your painting over your daughter. I did not choose painting, Elaine said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. I was forced out. You were weak, Marla sneered. And now you come back here acting like a mother? You are a joke. Richard! Elaine turned her head to look at the man slumped in the armchair. Are you going to let her speak to me like that? Are you going to let her justify stealing from your daughter? My father looked up. His face was gray, sweat beading on his upper lip. He looked from Marla to me, his eyes darting around the room like he was looking for an exit that didn't exist. I didn't know, Richard stammered. He held his hands up in a pathetic gesture of surrender. Lena, honey, you have to believe me. I didn't know she signed your name. I thought we found a legal way. Marla told me she handled it. She said you agreed to help us but didn't want to be involved in the paperwork. You liar, Marla gasped, turning on him. You spineless coward. It is true, Richard insisted, his voice rising to a whine. I would never steal from my own daughter. Lena, I am a victim here too. She manipulated me. She told me the money was from an investment return. I looked at him. For a second, just a split second. A part of me wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he was just a fool, just a weak man who had been duped by a wicked woman. I wanted to salvage the image of the dad who used to carry me on his shoulders. But Jordan stepped forward. He didn't look angry. He looked clinical. He opened his binder again. That is an interesting defense, Mr. Hartman, Jordan said coolly, but it contradicts the evidence. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was an email printout. This is an email sent from your personal account to the loan officer at First National regarding the home equity line of credit application, Jordan said. Dated October 14th. He held it up for everyone to see. It reads, Please expedite the processing of the application in my daughter's name. She is unavailable to come into the branch due to work travel, so we will be submitting the signed documents via courier. We need the funds released by Friday to cover urgent family medical expenses. Jordan lowered the paper. You sent that email, Richard. You explicitly directed the bank to process a loan in Lena's name without her being present, and you lied about the purpose of the funds. My father's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. The lie died in his throat. I felt something shatter inside me. It wasn't a loud break. It was the quiet, final disintegration of the pedestal I had kept him on for 3 decades. "You knew," I whispered. "You didn't just look the other way. You helped her. You used me as a shield." "Lena, please," Richard begged, tears welling in his eyes. "I was desperate. The debts, the gambling. I was going to lose everything. I thought we could pay it back before you noticed. I was trying to save our life." "You weren't trying to save our life," I said, my voice shaking. "You were trying to save your lifestyle. You sacrificed my future so you wouldn't have to give up your country club membership." "He has always been a liar." "Lena," Elaine said softly, "he lied to you about the house. He lied to you about the money. And he lied to you about me." Marla let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "Oh, here we go. The saintly mother speech." "Tell her." "Richard," Elaine commanded, "tell her how you got full custody. Tell her why the judge gave you everything." Richard looked down at his shoes. "He told the court I was mentally unstable," Elaine said, turning to me. "He hired a doctor, a friend from his golf club, to write a report saying I was prone to hysterical episodes. He presented evidence of erratic behavior that was nothing more than me arguing with him about his gambling." I stared at her. "But he said you left. He said you didn't want to fight." "I fought for 2 years," Elaine cried. "I spent every dime I had on lawyers. But Richard had the house. He had the community standing. He had Marla." Marla smirked. It was a reflex, a flash of pride she couldn't suppress even now. "He married me because I knew how to win," Marla bragged. She looked at Elaine with pure contempt. "You were emotional. You were messy. Richard needed someone who could clean up his messes. I drafted the affidavits. I coached him on what to say to the social workers. I made sure we looked like the perfect American family. And you looked like the crazy artist." "You framed her," I said, the horror washing over me. "You gaslit an entire court system to steal me from my mother." "We did what was best for you," Marla yelled. "Look at you. You had a stable home. You went to good schools. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" I shook my head, feeling the nausea rise. "You tortured me. You spent 20 years making me feel small. You made me hate my own mother based on a lie. And now you are trying to take the only thing we have left," Marla screamed. Her eyes darted to the glass desk where the original folder of forged documents still sat, the folder Jordan had prevented her from burning. "Give me those papers!" She lunged. It happened so fast. Marla didn't go for Jordan. She went for me, thinking I was the weak link, thinking I was holding the evidence. She threw her body weight against me, her hands grabbing for the folder I was clutching to my chest. "No!" I shouted, stumbling back. "Give it to me!" she shrieked, clawing at my arms. Her fingernails dug into my skin. She was strong, fueled by a manic, desperate adrenaline. We grappled. I tried to push her away, but she hooked her leg behind mine. I lost my balance. I fell backward, crashing hard into the edge of the heavy oak library table. The sharp corner of the table connected with the side of my face, the exact spot where she had hit me with the crystal plate on Christmas. Pain exploded in my head, white-hot and blinding. I hit the floor. The folder scattered across the rug. I reached up to my face. The bandage was torn away. My hand came back wet and red. The wound had ripped open. "Lena!" Elaine screamed. I looked up through a haze of pain. Marla was scrambling on the floor, trying to gather the papers. She didn't care that I was bleeding. She didn't care that she had hurt me. She only cared about the evidence. "Stop it!" Elaine yelled, throwing herself onto Marla. She grabbed Marla's shoulders and yanked her back. Marla turned, snarling like a wild animal, and raked her nails across Elaine's forearm. 4 bright red lines appeared instantly on Elaine's skin. "Get off me!" Marla screamed. "Stop! Stop it!" Richard was standing by the fireplace, his hands gripping his hair, yelling at the air. He didn't move to help me. He didn't move to pull his wife off his ex-wife. He just stood there, paralyzed by his own cowardice, watching the women in his life bleed. 911, a voice whispered from the hallway. I turned my head. Leah Morton, the realtor, was standing in the doorway, her phone pressed to her ear. She looked horrified. "Yes, immediate assistance. Assault in progress. There is blood." Suddenly, there was a heavy pounding on the front door.
Bang, bang, bang.
"Police, open up!" The sound cut through the chaos like a knife. Marla froze. Elaine let go of her and scrambled over to me, pulling me into her arms. "I have got you," Elaine sobbed, pressing her sleeve against my bleeding cheek. "I have got you, baby." The front door burst open. It hadn't been locked after the Vanderbilts fled. Heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. 2 uniformed officers stormed into the den, hands on their holsters. "Separate! Everyone separate now!" the lead officer barked. Marla scrambled to her feet, instantly shifting gears. She threw her hands up, tears springing to her eyes, her voice turning into a whimper. "Officer, thank God!" she cried, pointing a trembling finger at Elaine and me. "They attacked me. This woman broke into my house. I was just trying to defend myself." The officer looked at Marla, standing there in her expensive dress. Then he looked at me, sitting on the floor with blood pouring down my face. He looked at Elaine, shielding me with her body. He looked at the papers scattered on the floor. "Ma'am, step back," the officer ordered Marla, his tone leaving no room for argument. "But it is my house," Marla wailed. "They are trespassing." "We received a call from a neighbor about a disturbance," the officer said, "and another call from a witness inside regarding an assault." Jordan stepped forward. He held his hands up, palms open, showing he was unarmed and calm. "Officers, my name is Jordan Blake," he said, his voice cutting through the hysteria with legal precision. "I am the attorney for the victim, Lena Hartman. This is a situation involving aggravated assault, identity theft, and attempted mortgage fraud." "He is lying!" Marla shouted. "Officer," Jordan said, pointing to the papers on the floor, "those documents contain proof of forgery. That woman, Marla Hartman, just assaulted my client while attempting to destroy evidence. My client has an open wound on her face from a previous assault by the same individual on Christmas Eve." The officer looked at my face. He winced. "Okay," the officer said. "You," he pointed to Richard. "In the kitchen. You," he pointed to Marla. "Dining room. Now." A second officer moved to escort Marla. She started to struggle, just a little. "Do not touch me," she hissed. "I am the victim here. Look at this mess. They ruined my open house." "Move," the officer said. As they dragged Marla out of the room, she locked eyes with me one last time. There was no remorse, only a pure distillation of hatred. Elaine helped me stand up. My legs were shaking, but I felt a strange, cold clarity. The lead officer approached me. He had a notepad out. "Ma'am, do you need an ambulance?" he asked gently. "I will take her to the ER," Elaine said quickly, "but we need to make a statement first." "Can you tell me what happened?" the officer asked. I took a deep breath. I looked at the empty spot where my father had been standing. I looked at the blood on the floor. My blood, spilled in the house my grandfather built to keep me safe. "I want this on the record," I said, my voice rasping but loud enough to be heard in the next room where I knew Marla was listening. "Go ahead," the officer said, pen poised. "My stepmother, Marla Hartman, attacked me," I said. "Twice, once on December 24th, and again today. She did it to stop me from reporting a crime." I looked the officer in the eye. "I never signed those loan documents," I said. "I never authorized the sale of this house, and I am pressing charges against both of them." The days that followed the raid on my grandfather's house were a blur of legal filing and bureaucratic violence. It was not the physical violence of a crystal plate shattering against a cheekbone, but the slow, grinding violence of the justice system, dismantling a life built on lies. Jordan was a machine. He did not sleep. He did not eat. He existed on espresso and spite. Within 48 hours, he had filed 3 separate formal complaints. The first was with the Briarwood Police Department for aggravated assault and criminal fraud. The second was with the Illinois Attorney General's Office for identity theft and elder financial abuse regarding the trust. The third was a direct motion to the probate court to remove Richard Hartman as the trustee of the Walter Hartman Family Trust for breach of fiduciary duty. The immediate result was a temporary restraining order and a lis pendens slapped on the property. The house was frozen. It could not be sold. It could not be refinanced. It was a crime scene wrapped in red tape. Marla and my father were dragged in for questioning, then released on bail pending the preliminary hearing. They returned to the house because the eviction order hadn't gone through yet, but the dynamic had shifted tectonically. They were ghosts haunting the hallways, avoiding the den where the evidence had been found, avoiding the kitchen when I was making coffee. Marla, true to form, did not go down quietly. She hired Arthur Dugan, a defense attorney known around Chicago for his expensive suits and his ability to delay trials until the witnesses died of old age. Dugan's strategy was immediately apparent. He was painting Marla as a victim of complex financial jargon. My client was under severe emotional distress, Dugan told the press on the courthouse steps. She relied on bad advice. She misunderstood the terms of the trust. This is a family misunderstanding that has been blown out of proportion by a vindictive stepdaughter. My father, however, did not have a slick lawyer. He had a public defender because Marla had drained their joint accounts to pay for Dugan's retainer. That was why he cornered me in the laundry room 3 days before the hearing. I was folding towels, the mundane rhythm of domestic life clashing with the impending legal doom. Richard stood in the doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. His skin was gray, hanging loosely on his frame. He smelled of stale scotch and fear. "Lena," he said, his voice cracking, "we need to talk." "Talk to Jordan," I said, not looking up from a blue bath towel. "I cannot discuss the case with you. Dad, you know that." "I am not talking about the case," he pleaded, stepping closer. "I am talking about your father. Lena, honey, you have to go easy on us. You have to tell the prosecutor you made a mistake about the authorization." I froze. I slowly set the towel down and turned to look at him. "A mistake?" "I cannot go to prison, Lena," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "I have high blood pressure. I have a bad heart. Prison will kill me. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the girl who sent her own father to die in a cage?" "You sent yourself," I said coldly, "when you signed my name to a loan application." "I did it for the family," he insisted, clutching his chest as if to emphasize his frailty. "I did it to keep the lights on, to keep the roof over your head. Marla, she said it was the only way. She said we would pay it back before you ever knew. I was trying to protect you from the burden." "You weren't protecting me," I said, feeling a deep, ancient exhaustion settle in my bones. "You were robbing me. You were stealing my credit score to buy Marla jewelry and fund your gambling habit. Do not lie to me. Dad, we saw the ATM withdrawals at the casino." He flinched. I was trying to win it back. I was trying to fix it." "It does not matter," I said, picking up the laundry basket. "It is out of my hands. The state is pressing charges. The bank is pressing charges. I am just a witness now." "You can stop it," he begged, reaching out to grab my arm. I pulled away sharply. "If you refuse to testify, if you say you gave verbal consent, it all goes away. Please, Lena, for old time's sake, for the dad who taught you to ride a bike." "That dad died a long time ago," I said, pushing past him. "The man standing here is just a thief who is afraid of getting caught." The preliminary hearing was held in courtroom 4B, a windowless room that smelled of floor wax and misery. Judge Holloway was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen every variation of human greed imaginable. She did not look impressed by Arthur Dugan's Italian suit. She looked even less impressed by Marla, who was wearing a modest beige cardigan and no makeup, trying desperately to look like a confused housewife. Jordan sat beside me at the plaintiff's table. Elaine sat directly behind me, her hand resting on the back of my chair, a constant source of heat and strength. The purpose of the hearing was to determine if there was enough evidence to proceed to a full criminal trial and to rule on the emergency motion regarding the control of the house. Jordan wasted no time. He was surgical. Your Honor, Jordan began, standing tall. This case is not a domestic dispute. It is a calculated, multi-year conspiracy to defraud a family trust, commit identity theft, and embezzle funds from a protected beneficiary. He walked the court through the timeline. He presented the original loan application. This signature, Jordan said, projecting the image onto the courtroom screen, purports to be Lena Hartman's. However, bank records show that at the exact time this document was notarized, allegedly by a friend of Ms. Hartman's stepmother, my client was physically located at her office in downtown Chicago, logged into a secure server. We have the biometric entry logs to prove it. Marla stared straight ahead. Her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth would crack. Furthermore, Jordan continued, we have the transaction history. $78,000 drawn against the equity of the home. Not 1 cent went to the maintenance of the property. It went to luxury retail, a failing business owned by the defendant's sister, and an individual named Colton Reyes. Judge Holloway peered over her spectacles at the defense table. Mr. Dugan, do you have an explanation for why Ms. Hartman's signature appears on a loan she claims she never saw? Dugan stood up, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, we argue that there was implied consent. Lena Hartman lived in the home rent-free for 3 years. It was understood that her credit would be used to support the household expenses. She is an adult woman who enjoyed the benefits of my client's hospitality. Now that she is moving out, she is using the legal system to renege on a verbal agreement. Implied consent? Jordan scoffed, though he kept his voice professional. Your Honor, implied consent does not allow for forgery, and as for rent-free, Jordan dropped a stack of papers on the evidence table. Thud. These are canceled checks and bank transfers from Lena Hartman's personal account over the last 36 months, Jordan said. Property taxes, roof repairs, boiler replacement, grocery bills. My client has paid over $40,000 into that household. She was not a guest. She was the primary financier. The judge picked up the stack, flipping through the checks. Her eyebrows went up. This does not look like a free ride to me. Mr. Dugan, Judge Holloway remarked dryly. Next came the testimony of Mr. Henderson, the representative from the trust administration firm. He was a dry, dusty man who seemed personally offended by the chaos. The Walter Hartman Family Trust is explicit, Henderson testified, his voice monotone. The property at 412 Oak Street was to be held in trust for the beneficiary, Lena Hartman, until such time as she chose to sell it. The trustee, Richard Hartman, was strictly forbidden from using the asset as collateral for personal debt. We denied his request to refinance in June. We were never informed of this secondary line of credit. So, any loan taken out against the house is invalid? Jordan asked. Completely, Henderson said. It is a fraudulent lien. Then it was Elaine's turn. She walked to the stand with her head held high. She didn't look at Richard, who was hunched over the defense table, staring at his hands. Mrs. Carter, Jordan asked, can you explain to the court why the house was placed in a trust? Because I insisted on it, Elaine said, her voice clear and strong. When Richard and I divorced 20 years ago, I had a choice. I could have fought for half the assets. I could have fought for alimony. But I knew Richard. I knew he had a gambling problem, and I knew his new wife, Marla, had expensive tastes. Marla shifted in her seat, shooting a venomous look at Elaine. I walked away from everything, Elaine continued, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. I let him paint me as the villain. I let him tell the court I was unstable. I let him take full custody. I did it all in exchange for one clause in the settlement. The house had to be protected for Lena. It was the only way I could ensure she would always have a roof over her head, even if Richard gambled everything else away. The courtroom was silent. I felt tears prick my eyes. For the first time, the legal record reflected the truth. My mother hadn't abandoned me. She had sacrificed herself to build me a life raft. I regret leaving, Elaine added, looking directly at me. I let my fear of him manipulate me into silence. I thought I was protecting her, but I left her alone with wolves. I am here today to make sure they do not take the last thing she has. Dugan tried to cross-examine her, tried to bring up the old psychiatric reports from the divorce, but Judge Holloway shut him down. Counsel, those reports are 20 years old and irrelevant to the question of mortgage fraud. The judge snapped. Move on. Then came the handwriting expert. He projected the loan signature over a sample of my real signature. It was brutal. You can see the hesitation marks here and here, the expert pointed out with a laser pointer. This is a tracing, and a poor one. The pressure points are all wrong. The person who signed this was drawing a picture of a signature, not writing a name. But the final nail in the coffin came from the police investigation. A detective took the stand, holding a sealed evidence bag containing Marla's phone. We executed a search warrant on the digital devices seized at the scene, the detective stated. We recovered a series of text messages between the defendant, Marla Hartman, and an individual named Colton Reyes. Please read the message sent on December 29th, Jordan requested. The detective adjusted his glasses. The message reads, Do not worry about the credit check. The girl's score is pristine. We will drain the line of credit before the sale closes. By the time the bank realizes the signature is fake, we will be in Cabo. Get out before she notices the mail. A collective gasp went through the small courtroom. Even Dugan looked pained. He rubbed his temples, realizing his misunderstanding defense had just been incinerated. That text message proved premeditation. It proved malice. It proved that Marla wasn't just a stressed stepmother making bad choices. She was a predator planning a getaway. Judge Holloway leaned forward, clasping her hands. She looked at Richard and Marla with an expression of profound distaste. In 20 years on the bench, the judge said, her voice low and dangerous, I have seen many families fight over money, but I have rarely seen parents so willing to cannibalize their own child's future. She looked at the defense table. I am finding probable cause for all felony charges. This case will proceed to trial. Given the severity of the evidence, specifically the flight risk indicated in the text messages, I am setting bail at $500,000 for Ms. Hartman and $200,000 for Mr. Hartman. Marla gasped. I do not have that kind of money. Then perhaps you should not have spent it on a personal trainer, the judge retorted. Furthermore, Judge Holloway continued, I am granting the plaintiff's motion for immediate possession of the property. Mr. and Mrs. Hartman, you are ordered to vacate the premises at 412 Oak Street within 48 hours. You are to remove only personal clothing and toiletries, no furniture, no electronics, and absolutely no documents are to be removed until the forensic accounting is complete. Vacate? Richard stood up, panic in his voice. But, Your Honor, it is my home. Where will I go? That is not the court's concern. Mr. Hartman, the judge said, banging her gavel, you have 48 hours. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel was the sweetest thing I had ever heard. The bailiffs moved in to handcuff them until bail could be posted. Marla was sobbing, loudly and dramatically, screaming at Dugan to do something. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly, but my heart was light. Elaine wrapped her arm around my waist. It is over, she whispered. You got it back. We walked out into the hallway. The air outside the courtroom felt cleaner, lighter. But before we could reach the elevators, a voice called out, Lena! I turned. It was Richard. He was being led away by a bailiff, but he had stopped, digging his heels in. He looked pathetic. His tie was askew, his face splotchy. Lena, wait, he pleaded. I signaled the bailiff to wait a second. I walked over to him, stopping just out of reach. What is it, Dad? Where am I supposed to go? He asked, his voice trembling. Marla. Her sister won't take us in. I have no money. The accounts are frozen. He looked at me with wide, desperate eyes. The house is big. Lena, he whispered. It has 4 bedrooms. Maybe I could just stay in the guest room, just for a few weeks, until I find my footing. I am your father. You cannot just throw me on the street." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had let his wife throw a plate at my face. The man who had emailed the bank to expedite the theft of my identity. The man who had chosen his comfort over my safety every single day for 20 years. "You had a choice," I said softly. "Please," he wept. "I raised you." "No," I said. "You housed me. There is a difference." I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he could hear. "You have had my entire life to treat me like a daughter. Dad, you had 32 years to be a father, but every single time it mattered, you chose to treat me like an asset. You treated me like a savings account you could raid." I stepped back. "And now," I said, "the account is closed." I turned around and walked away. I heard him sobbing my name, but I didn't look back. I walked toward the elevator where Elaine and Jordan were waiting. I walked toward the exit. I walked toward the first day of my life that actually belonged to me. It was a Tuesday morning in late January when the gavel finally came down, severing the last tether between me and the people who had raised me. The sky outside the Cook County Courthouse was the color of a bruised plum, threatening snow, but inside courtroom 4B, the air was sterile and dry. I sat in the front row of the gallery, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Elaine sat next to me, her shoulder pressing against mine, a solid wall of support in a room full of shifting sands. Jordan was at the plaintiff's table, looking sharp and predatory in his navy suit. On the other side of the aisle, Marla and Richard looked like ghosts of the people they used to be. Marla had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Her roots were showing, a harsh gray line against the expensive blonde dye job she could no longer afford to maintain. She refused to look at me. She stared straight ahead at the judge's bench, her jaw set in a line of bitter, resentful silence. My father looked worse. He was slumped over, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. He looked small. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out by his own choices. There would be no dramatic jury trial. There would be no weeks of testimony where Marla could perform for an audience. They had taken the plea deals. In the matter of the People versus Marla Hartman, Judge Holloway announced, her voice echoing in the quiet room, on the charge of aggravated identity theft and conspiracy to commit wire fraud, how does the defendant plead? Marla stood up. Her lawyer, Mr. Dugan, nudged her elbow. "Guilty," Marla whispered. It was a strangled sound, like she was choking on the word. "I cannot hear you, Ms. Hartman," the judge said sharply. "Guilty," Marla said, louder this time, the word dripping with venom. The deal was lenient, in my opinion, but Jordan had assured me it was the surest way to secure the house. Marla accepted 5 years of felony probation, 500 hours of community service, and a mandatory restitution order. She avoided prison time, but she was now a convicted felon. Her days of playing the high society matriarch were over. Then it was Richard's turn. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of falsifying financial documents and breach of fiduciary duty. His sentence was 3 years of supervised probation and a hefty fine. But the criminal sentencing was just the preamble. The real victory came next, in the civil ruling regarding the Walter Hartman Family Trust. Judge Holloway shuffled the papers on her bench and looked over her glasses at my father. "Mr. Hartman," she said, her tone dropping to a scolding register, "you were entrusted with protecting this asset for your daughter. Instead, you treated it as a personal piggy bank. You violated the most basic tenets of your duty." She signed the order with a flourish. "The court hereby affirms that the property located at 412 Oak Street is the sole property of the trust. For the exclusive benefit of Lena Hartman, Richard Hartman is immediately removed as trustee. A court-appointed administrator will oversee the trust henceforth." She looked up, locking eyes with Marla. "Furthermore, I am issuing a permanent injunction. Neither Richard nor Marla Hartman may ever attempt to encumber, lien, sell, or transfer this property again. Any future attempt to use this address for credit purposes will be considered a violation of probation and will result in immediate incarceration." Then came the money. The defendants are jointly and severally liable for the $78,412 illegally drawn from the home equity line of credit, the judge ordered, plus legal fees incurred by the plaintiff in the amount of $12,000. You will pay this back. If you miss a payment, you go to jail. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Honor, Richard mumbled. Yes, Marla hissed. It was done. The gavel banged, a sound like a gunshot that signaled the end of the war. We walked out of the courtroom and into the busy hallway. I felt lightheaded. It wasn't joy, exactly. It was relief so profound it felt like exhaustion. The weight of the secrets, the lies, and the financial terror that had been crushing me for months was finally gone. We reached the bank of elevators, and that was when they caught up to us. Lena. It was Marla. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't playing the victim. She was standing there, clutching her purse, looking at me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. I hope you are happy, she spat. You destroyed this family. You sent your father to the poorhouse over money. I sent him to court over fraud, I corrected calmly. There is a difference. You think you won? Marla laughed, a brittle, jagged sound. You got the house. Congratulations. A big, empty house full of rot. You are going to die alone in that place. Lena, you are going to sit in those rooms and realize that no one loves you. You pushed away the only people who were willing to put up with you. It was her last weapon, the fear of abandonment, the button she had been pushing since I was 10 years old. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized she was small. She wasn't a monster. She was just a greedy, unhappy woman who had tried to eat me alive to fill her own emptiness. I would rather be alone than be owned, I said. My voice was steady. And I would rather be in an empty house than in a full one built on lies. Marla sneered, opening her mouth to retort, but Elaine stepped forward. She didn't say a word. She just stared Marla down. Marla huffed, turned on her heel, and marched toward the exit, her heels clicking angrily on the tile. My father lingered. He looked at the elevator buttons, then at me. He looked like he was waiting for me to fix it. He was waiting for me to tell him it was okay, that I forgave him, that I would help him with the restitution payments. I remember when you were 5, he said softly, his voice trembling. I took you to Lincoln Park. You were scared of the big slide. I held your hand all the way down. Do you remember that? I felt a lump form in my throat. I remember, Dad. Does that not count for anything? He asked, his eyes wet. Does the fact that I loved you not count for anything? I made a mistake, Lena, but I am still your dad. I looked at this man, this stranger wearing my father's face. He truly believed that love was a currency he could trade for forgiveness, no matter how high the debt. It counts, I said, my voice thick with grief for the relationship I wished we had. It counts, but it does not erase what you did. You cannot hold my hand on the slide and then push me off the cliff when I am 30. He reached out, as if to touch my arm. I took a step back. I cannot help you. Dad, I said. I cannot be your retirement plan anymore. Can we talk? He begged. Just 5 minutes? Private? Without the lawyers? Elaine looked at me, a question in her eyes. She was ready to intervene if I needed her. I shook my head. No, there is nothing left to say. The judge said it all. The elevator doors opened. Jordan held the door. Elaine guided me inside. As the doors slid shut, the last thing I saw was my father standing alone in the hallway, looking at his hands, finally realizing that there was no one left to clean up his mess. We drove straight to the house. The sky had darkened, and a light snow was beginning to fall, dusting the windshield of Elaine's rental car. When we pulled into the driveway of 412 Oak Street, a white van was already parked there. Smith & Sons Locksmiths. And parked on the street was a moving truck. Marla was there. The court order gave them 48 hours, but Jordan had arranged for a court-appointed monitor to supervise the immediate surrender of the keys. Marla was standing by the truck, watching 2 movers shove a sofa into the back. She wasn't allowed to take the furniture. Most of it belonged to the house, but the judge had allowed her to take the items she had purchased with her own money prior to the fraud. It wasn't much. We walked up the driveway. The air was biting cold. The locksmith, a burly man named Dave, was working on the front door. He had a drill in his hand. The sound of metal grinding against metal was loud and aggressive. Marla turned to look at us. She held a box of clothes in her arms. "I hope the pipes burst," she muttered as she walked past me toward the truck. "I hope the roof caves in on you." "Goodbye, Marla," I said. I didn't even turn my head to look at her. She wasn't worth the neck movement. I walked up to the porch. Dave the locksmith stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. "All done, Ms. Hartman," he said cheerfully. "Deadbolts, handle sets, back door, side door. Nobody is getting in here unless you want them to." He held out a hand. In his palm sat 4 shiny brass keys. "Here you go," he said. I reached out and took them. The metal was cold and heavy. Elaine was standing beside me. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something else. It was the small, tarnished silver key, the one we had found in the hollow space behind the bookshelf, the key to Grandpa Walter's secret drawer. She placed it in my hand, right on top of the new house keys. "This should have been yours a long time ago," she said softly. "Walter wanted you to have the truth. Now you have the house to go with it." I closed my fingers around the keys, a fistful of metal, a fistful of power. Marla's truck engine roared to life, with a final angry screech of tires. She pulled away from the curb, skidding slightly on the fresh snow before disappearing down the street. My father wasn't with her. I didn't know where he was going, and for the first time in my life, I forced myself not to care. "Are you ready?" Elaine asked. "Yes," I said. I inserted the new key into the lock. It turned smoothly, with a satisfying click. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was quiet. It didn't smell like Marla's vanilla candles anymore. It smelled of cold air and old wood. It smelled like it used to. I walked through the foyer, my boots leaving wet prints on the hardwood floor I had paid to refinish. I walked into the living room. I walked into the kitchen. Every room held a ghost. Here was where Marla made her snide comments about my job. Here was where Dad told me he couldn't afford the furnace repair. Here was the dining room, where the crystal plate had shattered against my face, breaking the spell of my obedience. But they were just echoes now. They couldn't hurt me. I walked to the back of the house, to the den, Grandpa's study. I walked over to the bay window. It was painted shut with years of Marla's beige paint. But I didn't care. I unlocked the latch and shoved. I shoved hard, putting my shoulder into it. With a loud crack of dried paint giving way, the window flew open. A rush of freezing winter air flooded the room, chasing away the stagnant heat. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like snow and pine. Far away, down the street, I could hear the sound of children shouting as they played in the snow. I wasn't scared. I thought about the future. It wasn't going to be easy. I had a big house to maintain on one income. I had memories to scrub out of the carpets. I had a relationship with my mother to rebuild from the ground up. But as I stood there, feeling the wind on my face, I realized something. For 32 years, I had been a guest in my own life. I had been paying rent to exist. I had been apologizing for taking up space. No more. Elaine walked into the room and stood beside me. She didn't say anything. She just put her arm around my shoulders and looked out at the snow-covered yard. "It is a good house," she said finally. "It is," I agreed. "And now, it is clean." We stood there for a long time, watching the sun begin to set, casting long purple shadows across the snow. The house creaked around us, settling into the cold, but it didn't sound like a complaint anymore. It sounded like a sigh of relief. Eventually, the cold became too much. "Come on," I said. "Let's go get some dinner. I am buying." We walked back through the quiet house. We stepped out onto the front porch, pulling the heavy oak door shut behind us. I put the key in the lock. I turned it. The deadbolt slid home with a solid, definitive thud. I looked at the door. I looked at the brass numbers, 412, gleaming under the porch light. They used my name as a signature on their lies. Today, for the first time, I signed my own life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe winding down for the bed? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories. If you enjoyed Lena's journey to justice, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help us share these stories with more people. See you in the next one.